Today's Wednesday, October 20th. I am Holly Drello Babcock, current chair. Tom Solon is this way. He's the vice chair. Beth Williams is a school board member. Tim Grisone, Patrick West, our high school principal and middle school principal. Coming around the corner, we have Cindy Van Conant and Krista Whalen, both school board members. Linda Sherwood, our assistant business administrator, thank you. Gina Bergsock, our assistant superintendent, and Andy Corey, our superintendent. So at this point, I need to appoint a process observer. Beth was raising her hand. Thank you, Beth. Beth will be our process observer. Are there any agenda adjustments?
I don't have any.
Great. So at this point, nominations, resignations, and correspondence.
I have a resignation. Dear Tim, please accept this letter as formal notification that I am resigning from my position as English teacher with Hollis Brookline High School due to personal reasons. My last day will be Tuesday, November 2nd. Thank you for your opportunity to work in this position. I have greatly enjoyed my time interacting with staff and students. And that is from Kate Moat. The administration supports this resignation based on what we know, and hope you will be able to do the same.
What's the last name?
Moat, M-O-T-E.
Okay, effective November 2nd.
Correct.
So I'm going to need a motion to accept the resignation of Kate Moat as high school English teacher, effective November 2nd. Moved by Tom, seconded by Beth. Are there any comments?
What classes are taught by this individual?
English 9, English 10, and writing.
Okay.
And what are the repercussions of the vacancy as far as coverage?
Go ahead.
So, excuse me. The short-term coverage will be handled internally by department members, similar to what's been done in past in different departments. And the goal will be to find a more permanent replacement in the near future. The position has been posted as an interim.
So the coverage will be by staff members who are capable of supporting the curriculum?
Yeah, other English teachers, yep.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All in favor? That's 6-0-0. Motion carries.
5.
5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, and Kate's not here either.
Right.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes. For the public, Liz Brown is running late, and Kate Stoll is unable to be here because of personal reasons. So we are now 5-0-0. Thank you.
And I just have one piece of correspondence. At the SAU meeting, I had told the SAU board that we had received a grant in a total of $214,890. I just wanted to break it down a little this month, and then next month we'll ask you formally to accept the grant. So this grant, when submitted, we requested 53 Lenovo Chromebooks at Hollis Brookline Middle School. Those come with a 3-year warranty as well as a Google license. And then at Hollis Brookline High School, we submitted for 79. So we'll be getting 132 Chromebooks with the 3-year warranty and the Google licenses. And the portion of the grant awarded for the co-op would be $51,480. I'll bring that to you next month in a much more official format once we go through some last minute details and ask you to accept it at that time. Our intent is to purchase the Chromebooks in the spring because that will also increase their longevity in terms of users, and it'll keep us on a cycle so we won't have, Carol Tyler's working on the fact that we wouldn't have, say, a large significant group to be replaced in 1 year. We get on a much more manageable replacement cycle. So I'll have more information for you then.
Who's the grant from?
It is from the E-rate, which is the federal E-rate that requires us to, for our internet and everything we have in the schools. The only requirement we have for the grant is what we have always had, and that is to have filtering systems on our internet.
No other strings.
No other strings. Yep.
Thank you for that information. Great. Anybody else have questions? No. Okay, so go ahead.
Do the letters that came to the board need to be
Oh,
recognized?
sure. I mean, we haven't been doing that, but if we want to, I can definitely recognize that I have in the past mentioned when we've received correspondence on a specific topic, and this month we received some correspondence related to a potential actually, it's not a change in policy, a clarification in the policy related to board members' conflict of interest. And some of those emails came from staff members as well. So asking us to reconsider making any kind of a change. So, and we did receive a little, I received an email or two regarding concerns that we're not masking kids. So, I did not forward those on, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
One of them should have been forwarded, so.
That would be just my second piece of correspondence. I just wanted to give a brief explanation of what a cluster is for the board. In our last notification, we were identified as having a cluster. That is simply a group that is what I would call related by the virus. It could be two couples who go out on a double date, and 3 of the members of the 2 couples come down with COVID. Because they are related and identified each as a contact person, that becomes a cluster. So I just wanted people to understand that. We had clusters last year, it just didn't more formally named, and it's actually I'd say a smaller number than last year that constitutes a cluster. And if you get 2 clusters, then you're considered to have an outbreak. So you could have 6 children, as minimal as 6 children, which gives you the designation of an outbreak. Obviously, Tim, Gina, myself, and Lauren are monitoring those closely. Our numbers still remain very, very good. Knowing the information that we get through the contact tracing, we feel comfortable where we're at and what has been identified, and have a contact with the state of New Hampshire that we work through. Once a cluster is identified, that person stays with us for 2 weeks as we go through this process.
So it's the state definitions of the 3 for the cluster.
Correct. Yep.
Any other correspondence?
That's it.
Great, thank you. Move on to the approval of minutes. I'm going to need a motion to accept as amended with the following amendments. Page 4, line 37, replace in with is. Page 7, line 46, replace purchase with purchase. Page 11, line 5, schools should be singular. And page 11, line 20, replace extension with extensive.
So moved.
Moved by Beth,
Second.
seconded by Tom. Any questions on the minutes? All those in favor? 6-0-0, motion carries. And then we need to accept the minutes as presented from the public hearing of September 15th, 2021. So I need a motion to accept as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Beth, seconded by Tom. Any comments? All in favor? 6-0-0. In a moment, I'm going to open the floor for public input. I'm not going to read our whole policy today because we don't have as many members of the public present, but I think everyone's pretty aware that we ask for respectful public input. We limit public input to 3 minutes. We ask you to state your name and your address when you come to the mic, and we ask that you remain focused on topics that are on the agenda. So at this point, at 6:09, I'd like to open the floor for public input.
Good evening. My name is Jema Wilder, and I live at 48 Pierce Lane in Hollis. I feel that I have been very patient, along with other parents that have also been very patient along this road that we've been on since the beginning of COVID. I will no longer waste my time coming to these meetings and voicing my concerns in this way, because the last meeting I was here, I had a member of the board look to the wall and look away from me and wouldn't even make eye contact or give me any recognition or acknowledge my presence. As far as the agenda items go and your review of them, the public comments should stay as they are, not shortened or restricted. The budget will not pass if the committee does continue to waste taxpayers' dollars on a PR person to create a divide between the parents and the school. or if you continue to allow the purchase of critical race theory material for our district. I have decided to organize protests, make phone calls, and even go door to door to raise awareness of what's happening in our schools. You are teaching critical race theory, and you can rename it, you can relabel it, but it is here. You are gaslighting parents by acting as though it does not exist in our school. You have approved purchases and trainings that teaches and implements it. There is sexuality in almost every subject. You are allowing white guilt, equity, social and emotional training, systemic racism to be taught, and you're proud of it. You aren't only teaching it, you're doing it to the kids. If by the end of the year, the school has not addressed these things, I will be encouraging parents to start homeschooling or starting a charter school. And I will take our money with us. For any parents that are listening and have concerns or would like to know more information, my name is Jayma Wilder, and my email address is jwilder15@msn.com.
Please address the board, please.
Thank you. Everything in the darkness will come to light. Thank you.
Is there any other public input? Seeing none, I'm going to close the floor for public input at 6:12. Thank you. All right. We'll be moving forward to the principals and athletic report. That would be, how are we going to do this, gentlemen? Who's going first?
Patrick's
Sorry,
going.
I'm just
Patrick's started.
just need to take.
Sure. Sorry I missed the last board meeting, and thank you, Tim, for sharing out my report. So this month is Kindness and Bully Prevention Month, ending with Red Ribbon Week. We're doing a lot of conversations involving thinking about others, sympathy, empathy, and other terms related to kindness. We have a lot of activities going on this month, including a bingo, which encourages healthy habits for students. At the end of the month, we'll collect those bingo sheets, and we'll announce some winners at the dance next Friday. There are some examples of some bullying posters that students did, bullying PSA activity in our rock. And we've also been writing holiday cards to troops this month. International Dot Day was at the end of September, which there's a picture, I think on page 3, of one of the bulletin boards right outside down the ramp, which is just a International Dot Day. Has to do with a book called The Dot, which promotes creativity, courage, and collaboration. Our 7th grade social studies students have been researching and working on Roman city projects, and I've been blown away by all the projects coming in, and just took a few snapshots of those projects so you can see them. They really were very impressive, things I've never seen in previous buildings that I've been in. We had our PSATs today, and that went great for our 8th graders. It was about a 4 or 5 hour test, and at the end of the test, the 8th grade teams had some fun activities for the teams to do this afternoon. Parent-teacher conferences are November 9th and November 16th. We're going to hold those virtually via Zoom. Those are going to be team-based with individual teachers that are not on teams setting up their own individual times. And then if parents are unable to meet during those times, they're able to set up parent-teacher conferences during common planning times for teams. We have our Veterans Day Assembly that we're doing again this year on November 9th, starting at 8:15. I've been in touch with a local veteran. I think he's part of the VFW or forget.
Both. He's on both.
He's on both. So him and I have been working to bring in a lot of veterans that day. We're going to do some coffee and treats. Unfortunately, we're not going to do our breakfast like we usually do. Just, again, the times, I don't think it's the best time to do that. So we are bringing them in. We are doing the Veterans Day Assembly. we're only going to have 8th grade students in the gym that day, and then we're going to live stream to the 7th graders in their rock. And there's a couple keynote speakers for that day. We are currently looking for applications for a long-term substitute position for art until the end of this year. Not the school year, sorry, but the end of 2021. And attached you can find the enrollment numbers, which I tried my best to copy Tim's format. And then there are just some important dates at the end there.
Thank you.
And I'm not sure how the enrollment numbers work, but I guess if you guys have any questions.
Well, first we'll just comment on the report, and then we'll talk about the
Sure.
enrollment numbers. So,
I'm just confused. With enrollment numbers, are we talking about the class size report?
class size, that's what it is.
But we were also supposed to be getting actual enrollment numbers, totals. Is that information also available? Because I thought,
That wasn't what we asked for. We asked for class size numbers.
no,
for
but
Right.
at the last meeting, I thought it said that the enrollment numbers would be, the state enrollment numbers would be out for the,
Oh, the NASDAQ numbers, yeah.
no, what we reported for October?
Yes, and the NASDAQ numbers are back to me, and I've been reviewing them to see if there's
Oh,
any.
okay, they're not yet ready for,
No. no,
Okay.
they're just,
I was just looking for that
yep,
clarification.
no
So it's
problem.
a class size that we're talking about today, class size
Sorry,
numbers.
class
That's okay.
size.
So first, before we get to class size though,
Sure.
why don't we ask if there, I wanted to ask if there are any comments or questions on the principals, like this, the middle school principals report, just the first part of this, before we get to numbers. I wanted to say thank you very much for including all those photos. And also, I think it's great that you're impressed by the Roman City projects, because they are super impressive projects. But if you've ever been a parent who's gone through that process,
Not yet.
you would say that they're impressive, but they're impressive. That impressive is the word. That's the word. And so on so many levels.
The good news is, in the 10 years that I've had the enjoyment of these projects, they
Yes.
have sort of
Yes. No.
pulled them back, and they're no longer like month-long endeavors and
It's an-
feeding hungry
yes.
middle school boys.
Super incredible project.
We have some really talented parents.
No, no,
I didn't
but
say
they're
all of them.
beautiful.
I'd like to
No,
get
it's just
some.
like, it's a lot. There's multiple like nights of pizza with
Yeah.
people in your house.
Hundreds of dollars have gone into
Keeps the
styrofoam.
economy going.
Yes, yeah.
Marriages were strife.
Okay, so, that being said, I think it's great, like, with new, fresh eyes, that it is really an incredible thing, and it's all set up, right, in the classroom
Yep.
and all that.
Yep,
Yeah,
they're all
it
displayed.
is an incredible thing, and I
Yep.
do love that, and I think it's a great tradition, and I love the fact that our kids have some traditions, like, everyone who's gone to Hollis Brookline for the last 20 years will be able to talk about their Roman, it's sort of like what the Animal Project was in 2nd grade, but they got rid of that, so, but that was such a nice tradition. Okay, just moving on. Just saying, like, you'll run into people when they're 30 and they can tell you what animal they did. Okay, just saying, but they got rid of that, so never mind. Okay, moving on. Sorry. Why don't we talk about the enrollment numbers? Not the enrollment numbers, I'm sorry.
Class
The class size numbers. Yes. Do you have any questions for Patrick? He sent the spreadsheet out to us, and also we have the numbers in front of us. I will comment that in middle school, it's so clearly we have 4 teams, we have 200 students per grade, and so it's really just how does it play out in certain areas, right? So, did you have anything to comment on that, or?
Nope, other than Beth and I just spoke briefly about the math class sizes. 8th grade currently has about, I think, 30, 35 less students in the entire grade. So that's why I think you'll see just smaller numbers in the 8th grade sections versus the 7th grade sections. But like you said, it is a balancing game in middle school. I guess just in comparing to the high school and thinking about where the future of education is going, I'd like to start to explore different opportunities for classes and start to have those conversations about getting outside the kind of typical classes that I think we are used to. Looking at the high school classes that they offer, they have a diverse classes that they offer in each content area, and I just think that would be something that is one of our goals at the middle school, to start offering more diverse sections in each of those respective content areas.
Tom has a question.
How are the individualized reading, they're listed as courses, but how is that instruction being delivered?
How is that instruction?
How is it being delivered? Is that a standalone class for a student with that number of students with a single teacher? Or do they
Some sections,
Yeah.
there's some that have individualized reading with a couple of students in that class. So some teachers might have 3 students in there.
No, but I mean, but the numbers, where you have a number of students, is that one teacher and that quantity of students?
Yep, for some sections, yeah.
And are they grouped, are they subsets of teams, or does the team structure sort of disappear in that?
Yep,
Okay. And,
those are specialized teachers with,
and are they, there's no grade specified, is it occurring for both grades?
yep.
Okay, thank you.
Those are generally IEP students.
Hmm?
That's an IEP.
Usually
Right,
students
right.
that, have plans, either IEPs or 504 plans.
I wasn't sure if it was being delivered by teachers or by paraprofessionals or.
All instruction is by a certified teacher.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question that I've noticed. So we've got 7th grade algebra, and then maybe I'm just missing it. What happens, what do students who take algebra in 7th grade take in 8th grade? Do they move to geometry?
Geometry, yep.
Is that
Actually, my
on
question
here?
was going to be, is our 8th grade geometry class in-house, or those 18 kids
Is it
going up to the
listed
high
under
school?
geometry?
We have a teacher here.
Oh, it's
that
under
does that.
geometry, sorry, I couldn't.
It's
find
under
it.
G, yeah, we needed a group, you and I needed a group by subject, because
Yeah,
it's,
no, I think it is grouped by subject, but I think geometry just got.
well, like math together instead
Yeah,
of.
yeah.
Okay, so geometry, we're here. So the question I guess I had, because our algebra classes, the 8th grade classes are smaller than the 7th grade class. The way the scheduling is, could we just have algebra and maybe mix 7th and 8th?
No. So algebra,
Okay, I mean, you don't even have to keep going.
well, it's just if you remember that that begins by crunching content starting in 6th grade. So 6th grade does 6th and 7th. When they go to 7th grade, it's really 8th grade and algebra, which is different from those who did pre-algebra as a 7th grader, because that's sort of 7th and 8th combined. So you're just spiraling in different components of the curriculum. I mean, I suppose it could work, but one is on team and one is off team, which is another variable.
Got it, I understand.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
And Liz, I did try and follow Tim's, breakdown in math and English in that spreadsheet. I think I shared it with you, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you for crunching all those numbers. It's really important for us to see how it plays out from May to October and also year to year. So appreciate it.
Of course.
And middle school becomes much more boring than the high school conversation.
So moving on to where the numbers will be a little bit more interesting. Mr. Grisone, we'll hear your report first. We'll do the same structure.
So I'm going to do Brian's
Brian's
athletics
first.
report,
Right.
and then I'm going to kick it over for the suicide prevention and response plan,
And then
then I'll
we'll
do
come
my
back.
report. Yeah.
Okay, wow, you're controlling this. That's great to hear.
So our fall athletic season is coming to a close for some of our teams. If you didn't know, last night our field hockey team traveled all the way up to Kennett in North Conway and lost a heartbreaker in a shootout to end their season. But they had a phenomenal season, making the playoffs for the first time in many years. Our boys and girls soccer teams, as well as our girls volleyball team, are all poised for their playoff run. Our fall cheerleading just had a competition this past Sunday, and our football, bass fishing, golf, and unified soccer teams are all back to normal playing seasons this fall as well. For the middle school update, I'll just give a brief update here. Much like the high school, middle school teams have fully embraced being back to normal. The cross-country team hosted 2 meets. on their new course, which starts and ends at the softball fields up at the high school behind the turf. And they'll have it looks like they just had their final meet this past Saturday. Boys and girls soccer and field hockey teams all set up nicely to make the playoffs this fall. Girls soccer is sitting atop their standings with an undefeated 8-0 record, and boys soccer field hockey teams have only one loss apiece. Girls volleyball has had a great season, and it sounds like their season has come to a close. At the high school, we had the HB Tackles Hunger collection. We had the canned food collection in our Saturday night football game, where I think Holly was in charge of collecting cans that night, or
I was not.
accepted the responsibility of
I was a worker bee
collecting
on the
cans.
concessions. I am not in
Yeah.
charge of anything when it comes to football.
And I do believe there is a plan, I don't think it's happened yet, you've probably seen it on MUR, where we send teams of students to supermarket to go on a shopping spree. I believe Brian has plans for that. That just hasn't happened just yet. Mr. Bumpus and myself are excited to announce the creation of what we're calling SALC, which is a Student Athletic Leadership Committee, and our council. This group is small at the moment. We're looking to encourage student athlete leaders to be part of something a little bit bigger than just their individual sports, and serve the community as a leadership group in a lot of different areas, including in Bow we had this entity, and it was something that I would lean on often, and they also had opportunities to go outside of the school and take part in things up at the NHIAA for different council agenda items. So things come down the pike. I sat on a committee with students where we looked at different student extracurricular conduct, code of conduct policies throughout the state, and it just gives students within the building a little opportunity to get outside and work with other students, work with students outside of just Hollis Brookline, and just see how other schools are doing it, and it gives them a nice platform for their leadership skills. So we're excited about that. And it looks like his winter sports are going to open up. Registrations just opened Monday, and let's see, HBMS sports will start Monday the 8th of November, and HBHS will start on the 15th. So, if you have any questions about the athletics report, I'd be happy to attempt to answer some of those.
Do you have a question?
Yeah. Regarding the Student Athlete Leadership Council.
Yeah.
Is that a parallel or equivalent to something that exists already for non-athlete students?
So there's a variety of different leadership groups in the building that I think would be comparable. So as an example, in my principals PLC, we have an upcoming meeting where we've been asked to bring student leaders from the building to speak about mental health and wellness in our buildings, and what different schools are doing and what's working for kids. And in our building, I have the luxury of going to what we call our wellness ambassadors. We have a group that Chantel actually organizes and runs, where any student of any walk can take part. So yes, I would say this is another
So
opportunity.
there are similar opportunities available to students who are not involved with athletics?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Thank you, Tom.
Are there any other questions on this portion of the report? Okay.
All right, so I am proud to introduce to you, we have Mrs. Chantel Clardy here, our school counseling department chair, and Ms. Kim Meyer, our assistant principal of student services. They are here to present the suicide prevention and response plan for our district. So you have been provided with the PowerPoint in PDF format, but we are going to go through the presentation here with Kim and Chantel.
I got this.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you like us at the podium?
Where would you like us to
Uh,
be?
At the
If you
podium
use
for
the
the mic.
podium, you get the mic for the people at home.
Thank you.
Okay, so Chantel and I are here to talk about the co-op's suicide prevention and response practices that we currently have in place. And these are for both the middle and the high school, and we're focusing on 3 key elements: prevention, intervention, and postvention. So the framework of our suicide prevention and response practice stems from RSA 193J, which went into effect in July 2020. The RSA has 4 elements that we need to address in our practice in our schools: annual training for staff, education for students, crisis prevention resources, and building partnerships with community organizations that are tied to suicide prevention. So we know that positive relationships are really essential to help support students, particularly when they kind of hit some challenging times. So to support students, we have teams: the SIT team at the high school, which is the student intervention team, and the MTSS team at the middle school. Both teams meet regularly, and it allows us to discuss student concerns and to consider input from a variety of practitioners: classroom teachers, counselors, nurses, special educators. We kind of all look at things in a wraparound approach. The practice, it gives us a more holistic view of the students and multiple lenses to try to come up with potential interventions. So starting each academic year at our staff welcoming days, the counseling departments start by reorienting staff to our practices around suicide prevention and what protocols we have in place. We discuss when and how to follow the protocol, under what conditions the protocol needs to be followed. In alignment with RSA 193J, staff are trained annually. Right now, we are using the NAMI Connect program, which meets the requirements of the RSA. And another component that we need to be cognizant of are the warning signs. So we have a suicide protocol chart that Chantel handed out in your folder. One of these is included in each one of the classrooms where it's easily accessible by teachers to easily reference in the moment.
Thank you so much, Kim. I'm going to talk a little bit about protective factors and what we're doing organically for prevention in our buildings right now. So the biggest thing is connection. The #1 protective factor for any student who is at risk for suicide is connection with a positive adult, student, or any other connection within the building. So we focus a lot of our protective factors on that connection piece. So we want to organically make sure that we're meeting with each grade, whether they're coming to us in our office for a one-on-one meeting or not, so that they have a connection to their counselor and we can start to build rapport with them. So at the high school, we start in the fall with our seniors. They're thinking about next steps, and many of them are going off to college, maybe a gap year, military, a trade school. So we work with them in the beginning of the senior year, helping them navigate the next process. So we will work with them throughout that point. Then we meet with 10th grade and we help orient them to Naviance. So we've already done that already this year in our building. We help log them on to Naviance, which is a great tool for figuring out what career or college they may be going on to later on in life. So that's what we do with 10th graders. Then right after that piece, we want to orient our 9th graders. They're brand new to the building, so we want to make sure that we have a meet and greet with them so that they can get to know where we are, where our office is, and why we're there for them. And then also in 11th grade, in the spring, we meet with all of our juniors to discuss their upcoming plans for the following year. So that's how we build that in yearly to meet with every student, whether they seek out our services or not. At the middle school, they have mini meetings with 7th grade students. They also have school counselor presentations regarding bullying and suicide. They talk about Naviance, and they're a normal presence at lunches every single day to make sure that students are making connections with them. We also have orientation for new students. We have freshman orientation where all the counselors are present there, and we meet with our individual caseloads during that day. We did an icebreaker this year where we were out on the field and we played some games, sort of like the adventure lore that went over really well in the spring. So we used some of the techniques that they had with the students, and we did those with our freshman students. So I do feel like we've already got a face to the name of our new students, and we're just working on connecting. There's a 7th grade orientation as well, and a 2-day open house for the 7th and 8th grade students, again with a focus on connection. Okay, so counselors provide presentations throughout the school year. Right now at the high school, we're working on our bullying presentation for all 9th grade students in wellness classes. We also, around the midterm, we talk about mindfulness and relaxation and things like that. I know that exams can really stress a lot of students out, especially for freshmen where this might be their first large midterm exams. So we do go into the wellness classes to reach out to students as well. So we have a presence there additionally. This is also addressed in grade 9 wellness course, and for 7th and 8th grade, it's done in the health classes. School Counselor Week, which happens in February, is a great week for us to provide awareness regarding what a school counselor role is and how we're here to support the student body. So typically we plan fun events throughout the week, do announcements and things of that nature to sort of spread awareness on why you might go see your school counselor with students. We also have a variety of community resources. We're currently working on updating these. But when students come into our office and need assistance with community resources, we definitely provide them then. And we also have an extensive list listed on our website, which I said we're working on updating, as there are many practitioners right now that are no longer accepting new clients. So we're working on making calls and making sure that these resources are accessible for our families and our students. So I know that there's been a very large push for building-wide social emotional learning, so we've really been focusing on that at the high school as well as the middle school. We actually have a counselor at the high school right now who 0.8 of her job is, her caseload is a little bit smaller than everybody else's, and then the additional piece of her job is spreading SEL awareness. So we have a counselor at our school who a piece of her job is solely dedicated to SEL, which is great. So she just started weekly lunch groups with students who are having trouble in the lunchroom, students that may have social or sensory issues, are having trouble in a large environment. She's created a smaller lunch group where they can talk about different things and they can be in a better setting. So she's rolled that out. We had our first one this week. We're also doing individual and group meetings with students, as well as self-care for staff. We have a SEL committee at the high school as well as at the middle school who's focusing on rolling out different things for SEL. We're in the planning stages of an anxiety skills coping group. We've piloted this a couple of years ago. We're going to be continuing to offer that maybe with some other groups as well. And at the middle school, they have an SEL bi-weekly team meeting. This is comprised of administration, counseling staff, and teachers. School counselors in both places provide individual and group meetings with students. We do community-wide SEL assemblies, there's some field days, and various SEL-related skill groups. So this has been a big push as well, another protective factor for our students. So another protective factor is having a positive environment, just a positive school culture and climate, and I think that a lot of our professional development has been aimed at that lately, and we really appreciate it. I think that we're all working together to try to create a positive and welcoming school climate that welcomes diversity of ethnic, social, LGBTQ, gender, and other cultural aspects. At the high school, we do have an LGBTQ club that meets regularly to provide support and understanding to students. We also have a Gay Straight Alliance at the middle school. Just to let you know, one of the #1 demographics of students at risk for suicide do belong in this group, LGBTQ. So it's really important that we offer something to support these students. So we're doing that both at the high school as well as at the middle school. Our school counselors are going to be trained by GLSEN, which is the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network. So one of our school counselors currently is a member, so we're going to work on getting a training for all school counselors on that as well. All right, at the middle school, they have Rock, which is very similar to Advisory, where they are meeting daily with the same students and the same teacher, again, to build those connections. They have monthly theme curriculum as well. At the middle school, they do Fun Fridays, and they have theme community building days. The night games, which are kind of like a 2-week-long spirit week, if you will, with some healthy competition between others, just, again, fostering that connection. Other school events that we've done to do this as well are Challenge Day and Adventure Lore we did have come at the end of last year to help promote connection as well. Okay, so Tim mentioned this earlier. We piloted the Community Wellness Ambassadors last year in response to the ever-growing mental health concerns among the student population. So the CWA is made up of teachers and students who are tasked with destigmatizing mental health and promoting general wellness through connection. So some ideas that we have are some students maybe want to do a walking group. We have that lunch group that we started, so we will have some CWA members be a part of that lunch group as well. Maybe some craft groups. Last year we had a power outage and everybody left the building and ended up on the large field playing ultimate frisbee, walking around and connecting, and it was the most connected I had seen the student body maybe in the entire year. So I'm going to be working with Tim, so we maybe have 1 or 2 of these planned timeouts during the year where everybody leaves and gets outside, and maybe there's some fun activities out there that the Community Wellness Ambassadors are piloting. So we're just trying to think of other creative ways for students to connect outside of academics.
So as a district, we're working on our multi-tiered systems of support, and everything that we're doing around prevention with suicide prevention kind of fits into the MTSS pyramid. Starting down at the bottom, we have our Tier 1 prevention factors, those positive relationships, the positive school climate, home-based CAV block and ROC, and the many other protective factors that Chantel talked about. In Tier 2, this is where we would have our SIT and our MTSS intervention teams, our bi-weekly or weekly scheduled counseling check-ins for students, our quiet lunch options, and our choices program. And then for our Tier 3 prevention, this would be our students who receive school psychology services. They might have Section 504 or IEP specific programming in the area of social emotional.
Now we're going to talk a little bit about intervention. So a lot of what we were talking about is what we're doing to protect our students, those protective factors. What do we do when a student mentions suicide? So we have a very specific protocol, and I want to just alert you to the paperwork that's held by this brochure right here. If you want to take a look at that, I'll describe how we go through this paperwork. So if a student expresses intent to harm themselves or others, the student's counselor and an administrator meet with the student and a safety assessment is done. So even if it's, I did poorly on my exam today, I want to jump out the window, we take that very seriously. The student is brought down to school counseling. We let them know they are in by no means any trouble, but we want to make sure that everything is okay with them. There have been instances where somebody said that off the cuff jokingly, and then when you do ask them if they're having thoughts of suicide, they break down and there's a lot of other things going on. There are other instances where the kiddo was like, I just chose the wrong verbiage, I was really upset about my test, I'm not feeling suicidal. If that's the case, we would still call and alert the parent and make sure that they are aware that the student said that during the day. They weren't in trouble in any way, but we want to make sure a parent can check in with them. If the reverse happens and the student is feeling suicidal and has suicidal intent, then they need to leave or have a mobile crisis unit come and assess them before they can be cleared, safe to return to school. We want to make sure that they're able to learn, and if they're having feelings of suicide, we want to make sure that we're getting that checked out and getting them in a safe place as soon as possible. So a parent is called and they have choices. So if you look at this first page here, we would fill this out and talk about why the student was at risk and maybe what some statements that they said to lead us to that. So they can use Access Crisis Counseling. They can use the ER. There's Greater Nashua Mental Health. And then, like I mentioned earlier, there's a mobile crisis unit. So they will actually come right to the school and meet in the guidance conference room with the student and the parent and assess if they're safe to return to school. So they don't necessarily have to leave the building, and it may just be an hour-long meeting. The great thing about that service is they also provide wraparound support, so they do check in on the student after the fact and make sure that they're receiving therapeutic services after the send-out. The student may or may not have their own therapist that they meet with regularly as well, so that's also an option for the student to see their therapist. So once they return to school, they will need to come back with a note from that practitioner clearing them safe to attend academics, and there'll be a re-entry meeting that consists of the counselor, the student, a parent, as well as an administrator. And during that meeting, we're going to identify the safety plan. Should the student feel this way at school again, who would they reach out to? We typically have a primary, a secondary, and sometimes even a third contact of somebody that they know in the building that they feel connected to, that they could go to should they have those thoughts and feelings. So this is the paperwork that's provided to the parent and the student during a send-out, and I also wanted to show you that this is a little brochure. I know it can be a little jarring to be a parent, as many of you are here and receive a call that your student may be having some thoughts. So we want to give them a comprehensive guide to look at after the fact, if they may be a little shaken during the meeting, to remember what the process is, and there's additional information on the back. It also talks about locking up medications or weapons if they are in the home, so just some factors for families to be aware of. So that's all here in this packet for you to take a look at. So on the next slide, we have the just different options broken down for you in a chart. So they can see their private mental health practitioner. It won't be on site, it's off site. Sometimes they can have a same day appointment, maybe it looks telehealth, and that practitioner is typically familiar with their baseline and with their needs as well. The other option that we outlined was the mobile crisis team. That is on site. They will typically arrive within the hour to the caller's location and conduct a comprehensive assessment and let us know what next steps should be. There's also the option of walk-in and urgent care clinics and emergency room, which can be a little bit longer of a wait, but those are the options for students and parents should they need to be assessed. Postvention. What do we do after we see a student who has expressed suicidal ideation? How do we wrap around that student to make sure that we are providing them with all the supports necessary to be successful in school? So typically the counselor will schedule a regular check-in with that student. I know that many of my students I check in with weekly, so that would be a weekly check-in typically. We'll work with the family to ensure that outside therapeutic sessions are set up, and we can get a release of information from their therapist so that we can speak with them and make sure that the appropriate things are happening in school to best support them. So we have an open relationship with their therapist as well. If we feel the need at a tier 3 in disability services could be assist the student, we may refer them for a 504 or an IEP based on that disability and other services they may need to wrap around them. So I know that was a lot of information.
That's great.
But I just wanted you to have all of these pieces as well. So I don't know if anybody has any questions for us, but we're happy to answer any questions.
So one comment you made is how challenging it has been for students to find resources outside of, mental health resources currently. And just how much of an additional strain is that putting on your office because kids can't really get seen?
I wouldn't say additional strain. I would say that office visits have ramped up since last year. I think that there are some practitioners that are still accepting clients, and that's why I said we're working diligently on updating that list, because it can certainly be very frustrating if you're reaching out for assistance and you're going through a list and you're getting a no, we're not accepting new patients everywhere you go. But I think our office is very busy. It will continue to be very busy, but there's definitely a lot of students coming in assisting. And we do, like I said, weekly and bi-weekly meetings. We can't provide therapy, of course, but we can provide short-term interventions to help the student be successful.
Thanks. I'll let some other people ask questions. I have one more, but go ahead. Okay, one more for me. So when you look at I bet that this is for both of you and maybe for the principal, I don't know. So I see there's a lot built into Tier 1 and Tier 2. I feel like Tier 3, is there more that could be done? I see this as a plan that's very thorough and comprehensive and all of those things and I'm certainly going to support it, but I'm wondering if there's more that can be done in the Tier 3, or is this pretty standard?
I think given, like, kind of to carry over to your previous question about what the potential strain is on the counseling department, and it will answer your second question as well, is kiddos are coming in carrying a really heavy backpack of all of these barriers to their learning, and counselors are having to help students, and regular educators are having to help students kind of manage those in the moment. So when we think about community services not being as readily available, they're not getting that therapeutic support that they might need, and so that's kind of falling more on the school component. So school psychology services can look a variety of different ways. I know that our school psychologist at the high school, and I anticipate this might be very similar at the middle school, she will see students whether they have a plan or not if her expertise is needed. And certainly there are other things that we could consider for Tier 3. I'm not sure right now what they would be.
I didn't need examples. I was
Yeah.
just wondering if like this is pretty standard or if, you're seeing it in other
In my
areas.
experience in other districts, this is what we've kind of put together for Tier 3 is pretty standard.
Okay.
But of course, there's always different lenses we can look at things.
Great. I might come up with another question, but that's all I have right now. Tom?
Thank you. This is very enlightening. Is the presentation primarily about what's going on at the high school? Or was that middle school activity, is it parallel in the middle school as well?
It's a collaboration between both the middle and the high school. So we tried, where things were different, we tried to note, at the middle school it looks like this, at the high school it looks like that.
But the general overview was encompassing both
That is
buildings?
correct.
Yep.
Okay. Just to get a little bit of insight, how many students or how frequently are the occurrences that you are addressing issues that fall under this protocol?
More often than you think.
Obviously,
Yes.
but are we talking tens of students, 50% of our population?
No, I wouldn't say that high. I would say we probably follow this protocol maybe once or twice a month.
Okay.
It
Now-
depends on the year and what's going on as well. It ebbs and flows, but yeah, it's more than you think, but I wouldn't say that 50% of the population has utilized.
The reason I'm
services.
really curious about this is in some prior discussions we've had around things such as grading, the class rank discussions, all of those things, one of the focus that we've had in many of these discussions have been the level of anxiety, pressures and stuff. So we know that that's an issue, but I'm trying to understand how far it has escalated in severity. Do most of the reports stem from self-reporting or from third-party reporting?
I would say it's a combination of both. The students are really good at knowing when to come down and talk to school counselors, and I thank them every time. They're always saying to me, this person's going to be mad at me, and I'm like, no, you did the right thing. They may be mad at you for a moment in time, but overall, they're going to understand that you had their best interest in mind. So the students are great about reporting about their friends. So we do get a lot of reports from friends. We do get parents calling in and saying, this is what so-and-so mentioned at dinner last night. If you're in a conversation with a student, we are trained by NAMI to look for red flags. So, and the literature says that we're supposed to call it out directly. Sometimes people think talking about suicide is not a good thing, but if we're starting to see some red flags, we can ask, are you having thoughts of harming yourself? We can just ask the question directly. So sometimes in our conversations, in our offices, that question is coming up based on what the student is telling us is going on.
Do you have to identify who reported it if it's a third party?
Absolutely not.
No?
That remains confidential.
And a lot of what was in here talked about what staff and administration and faculty are doing. It did mention that there's an awareness trying to be built within the student population themselves. Not so much of, I mean, it's talking about students themselves to be aware of self-care. I'm just curious how you go about building that confidence and that strength for friends to take action rather than the fear of repercussions.
I think that that's what the CWA is aimed to do. We're trying to get students who are positive role models to be identified in the building as a community wellness ambassador, and that they are a safe place for people to come and talk to because they know where to take it if it needs to be an adult. Taking care of that issue. We want to take it off their plate. We don't want the young people having to walk around with these things. That's a lot to carry.
Yeah.
If a friend's informed you of that. So we want to make sure that it's well known what they should do with that information so that they can get it off their plate and onto ours to take care of.
And is it similarly communicated into the parent community so that, a lot of times the students may bring that concern home rather than voice it in the school? Do the parents then bring it back to you, you think?
I think a number of them do. They don't necessarily have to bring it back to the school. I think it's important information. It's a piece of the puzzle when we're looking at the holistic student. If they have an outside therapist and they've
No,
brought
I'm
their-
thinking more that a student is worried about their friend, but they're afraid to go to the school.
Oh, I would hope that if they went home and talked to a parent, that the parent would know that they need to call and make sure that that child is safe. But that's a really good point. Maybe we could incorporate some parent education at some point. Maybe have a speaker or something come in to educate
Or
the
it just
parents on what they should do if they're hearing this.
Letting
stuff
them
at
know
home.
what the correct channel to report something like that.
Right, exactly. They can always call the school counselor, absolutely. And if, the school counselor isn't working, they can always call the police department to do a safety check as well.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I just had one quick question. It's a little bit kind of out there, so I apologize. But I know this is all very much, and I could see where you're dividing between middle school and high school, but are there any supports in place for staff too? Because, that's actually a very big concern of mine. And unfortunately, in a previous district, I've lost a staff member. Along these lines. And so I was just curious if any of this has any direct, like what we're doing for our staff to put in place.
SEL is also looking at staff as well, and so I know that there's a lot of initiatives from the SEL group looking to help staff with self-care as well. I know we talk about it during our whole school meetings. There's some SEL components peppered into our whole school meetings. In the counseling office, we're always welcoming up staff members to come in if they just need to take a break and slip into one of our offices, absolutely. And I know that many staff members utilize Nancy Cook as well. So yes, we are very cognizant of that piece, and we're working on it in the SEL committee.
Awesome, thank you. I just want to throw that out there because I know it's very easy to
Certainly
kind of
important.
teach and preach what we should be doing, but sometimes it's harder to do that ourselves. So just
Absolutely, and in
having
this
that.
model that I provided for everybody that's in the teacher's classroom, there's a little bit about what to do after and self-care after that they've heard this from a student, so they're, we're trying to pepper that in when we can.
Any other questions? Very well done. Yeah, I thank you so much, and this is part of policy that we see this. I don't know if we have to see this annually, Beth. Do we have to see this annually? I don't remember. Yes,
The training part.
I think
But-
it was every other.
every other year. But I have to say, it was so helpful to see the Tier 1, all of the different pieces and the things that you're working on and the initiatives that you're taking as a group to really connect with our students, because I think folks don't really know exactly what's going on in the school and all the different things and the thoughtful approach to it. So I really appreciate hearing all of that. Thank you.
Thank you for listening, I appreciate it.
And you guys are free to go, unless you want to stay. I mean, you're welcome to stay.
I do also have our updated school profile that I'll pass around, so I'd be happy to end that conversation.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you.
So Tom, you will see enrollment numbers on our school profile as of October 1.
I don't think they want them back, so do you want me to take it back? Oh, thank you. I love the school profile. That's my favorite. Awesome. No worries. Thanks.
So I can take that over there before I can share.
Great. Thank you very much. Is this hot off the presses?
Yeah.
Hot off the presses. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Despite Andy's desire to review them first.
No, these are, but
No,
this is,
enrollment numbers. No, the NASDAQ numbers.
These aren't the NASDAQ numbers.
Oh,
These are
these
just,
aren't the
this is just the
numbers.
general.
These are just his numbers, and my worry NASDAQ is always kindergarten, first grade numbers.
Great, thank you so much for that. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the, what are we up to now, Tim, since you're in charge? Class size, is that what we're talking about?
I'll do my principal's report.
Right. Well, I want to thank you for, I'm sure you've been involved in the suicide prevention stuff too, so thank you for your time on that, both of
Yeah,
you.
hats off to Chantal and Kim
Yeah,
for
did a great job.
doing a great job with that presentation.
And I assume next month we will approve the plan. That will be under deliberation, so we'll vote on it. We will be asked to approve the plan. I'm going to vote yes, I'm just telling you now. So, okay, go ahead.
All right, so for my principal's report, I have a few items that I want to highlight here. So first off, it's not on this report, but we have our first performing arts celebration tomorrow night. We have a fall concert, which is taking place at 7 p.m. I sent out a message yesterday to parents about that. So that will be in the auditorium, and that will be our first live in-person event in quite some time. We have some national merit semifinalists and commendations to celebrate. We had 3 semifinalists and 2 students identified as commendation status. So out of the 3 semifinalists are among the top 16,000 students nationwide, and they will compete for the finalist level, which includes national merit scholarships, significant scholarship money. So that's very exciting to have 3 up this year and two students identified as commended students. So celebrate that. I'd like to say congratulations to Mr. Bumpus for, we had the NHIAA annual meeting this year, and Brian was named the Division II Athletic Director of the Year for this past school year, so that was nice to see. Brian does a great job up there in the athletic office. We have our Red Ribbon Week. I believe last month's meeting, we did talk about the Red Ribbon Week, and in years past, how there has been a wrecked car as a result of a DUI accident on display. So that will be on display the last week of the month, so next week, actually. So starting next week on the side field, by the old lacrosse field, I can call it now. We'll have that on display. There'll be a QR code bringing them to a web page with facts about DUI for the students to research. So I have that. I also have a couple items that I just wanted to inform the board. Our graduation committee is in conversation about a couple different things that will be up for discussion this year. So we have talked about doing the graduation ceremony at the turf field. It's not confirmed yet. We still are up, we're discussing the logistics of how that would work. Having the technology required for the live streaming and all of that up at the field by June will require some additional work. So that's not a guarantee, but that is being discussed. And we've also opened up the conversation. For the first time ever, we have the ability to host it at night with the lights. So that's something that we've talked about. That's kind of the farthest it's gone at this point. But we've talked about doing it on a Friday night in place of the Saturday morning ceremony. In years past, the valedictorian and salutatorian have offered a speech. That will be different this year with our academic honors being given in a Latin honors system. So we have talked about opening up a committee for applicants within the highest Latin honors group to submit their application for consideration to speak at graduation. So opening up the floor to more than just 1 or 2 students we thought would be appropriate. It's a format I've seen in another school. So talking about how that would work for HB and making the ceremony our fingerprint. And that was it for graduation. Similar to Patrick, we're going to do a Veterans Day Assembly on the 9th. We are going to host our local veterans for a small little gathering prior to our ceremony, where we will have 2 grades in the gym and we will live stream for the other 2 grades in classrooms. So we do have a live in-person component with some distancing, social distancing for the students as well. I also provided a hard copy of a recent reconsideration of instructional materials report in line with policies KEC and IGE. That is the principal's report that resulted from the book review committee that I oversaw. And I'm just gonna check my notes. I welcome any questions or comments on any of that.
First of all, congratulations to Brian Bumpus. Well deserved, so that's part of your report. I don't know how to look back. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? I did see that you sent out a performing arts newsletter.
I did. I can't guarantee the regularity of that newsletter. There was news to report.
Right, that was great,
Matt
though.
came out with some information for me, and I wanted to get that word out, so I sent that out. I think it was just yesterday that went out.
That was great. It was great to see that. And obviously, congratulations to the students who are National Merit semifinalists and commendations, and looking forward to Guitar Night and all of those great things. Today, we won't be doing HB highlights at the end of the meeting, so I'm glad that you've had an opportunity to highlight this. We will do it again next month. We just have a lot on the plate today. So, are there any questions for Tim on this? I was going to say I might need to read the piece on Speak and ask questions next month, just because we're just getting this. So I'd like to maybe put that under principal report next month. If you could just make a note and we'll just talk about it, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Just because I'd like to take a minute to read that. Are there any other questions on that part of the report? Because if not, we're going to go into class sizes.
No, quick comment. I just.
You skimmed it quickly?
I just cruised through this, and the last bullet says an alternative book that accomplishes will be made available. It would be really helpful when we have the discussion to understand what that alternative might be, its strengths and weaknesses, so that the summary says that it's a 20-year-old book and it might be better replaced by something current. It would be nice to be able to have that complete discussion at once.
Okay. Seeing no more questions on the report, thank you very much for that. I guess we can dig into class sizes. Do you have a little bit of anything you want to share on that?
Sure.
Or do you want us to just go right into questions?
So I'll start off with the process where we left off last in May with the projected numbers. If you looked at the way the spreadsheet was formatted, I included tabs for each individual department that corresponded with the same average enrollment projections from the spring. And then within each course, where each individual section fell. So as an example, within computer and engineering, we have a course called Engineering Technologies. We had 42 students request the course in May, an average of 21 students. That shook out to 2 sections instead of, you would think, 21. But as the natural process of scheduling takes place, adds and drops, students change their minds, students opt for different courses, you have transfer in, you have with students who withdraw. Those numbers ended at a 19 and a 20. So a little under where we shot for, but again, a healthy number, a pretty close number to where we estimated. And that holds true throughout, with obviously some unforeseen circumstances in different spots. You see that oftentimes in elective courses. When students sign up for classes, they sign up for first choice, second choice, and the data that we have are requests. And oftentimes, based on when schedules come out, students have opportunities in the add-drop period to change things, to drop classes, to add different classes. So there is fluctuation, kind of the human element like we talked about in May, that does take place despite our best efforts to stay on target with our average projections. So that's a general overview. I think instead of going through each individual department, I think it might make sense to open up. I know in the spring I went through detailed why we made certain moves, why we reduced certain sections and increased in other areas, and the rationale for that. I have that information. I can go over it again. That seems more like the May report, and then this is where we landed. So unless you would like me to speak to something specifically, I think opening it up to questions that I can attempt to answer.
I just want to say, first of all, the layout of this and the format that you sent was really helpful, to be able to see the requests, the sections offered, all of that. Also, the fact that you grouped even the regular, even when you take up the spreadsheet, you grouped everything by the same thing that Patrick did, grouping by department. Thank you for helping me finish my sentence. I think was very helpful for me. So this was great in the layout of all of it, and I think it tells a story with numbers. One question, popular reading, I had to go. I know the answer to this question, but I want the members of the public, when I look at English class popular reading, that is a class that a student is recommended by a case manager, correct, for that class? So it's one, go ahead.
Yep, it's a course that's offered typically to upperclassmen, and the sequencing of courses might be something like an English 9 read, an English 10 read, and popular read would be an upperclassman course for someone on that track.
Okay, that's what I was, because those numbers look really small, and I think somebody
And they would
member of the
correspond with
public,
like a
but that
9 read and a 10
it
read.
corresponds with English 9 read or those kinds of classes that we are required to
To meet the
offer
student
and
needs.
and keep small.
Yep.
I think sometimes members of the public will just sort this by number, like how many kids are in a class, and there's reasons for a class being 6 or 7 or 8 students.
Yeah, and I think when we review the program of studies and cover the specifics of those types of courses, and you read the language that describes a course such as popular read, it highlights maybe the reasons for those better ratios, those better student-teacher ratios.
Got it. I know you have questions, Tom. Anybody else? Before Tom goes. No, you all good? Okay, go ahead, Tom.
Thank you both for putting it together and for the supplying the documents. It was a little strange looking at the summary page and then going into the detail. The details seem to show larger class sizes overall than the numbers that came up as the summary, so I'm not sure how the math worked in that, but it was very helpful. It looks like, I don't know.
So the requests within the individual tabs, that's the number of students who requested the course.
No, I understand
Okay.
that, but there was only one column in the summary. It didn't show requests, so it was some kind of an averaging of numbers to calculate on the summary tab. I'm not sure what the math was on the summary tab of the spreadsheet.
So for the totals,
It doesn't, we don't have to dig into it. I'm just saying, it was just something that if we're refining it, we may want to figure out what that's doing. The classes that seem to consistently have sort of the smaller sizes were the ones that I believe are for students who are not necessarily at the level of proficiency desired for the mainstream classes in some of the disciplines. They're the more introductory level classes. And some of them are pretty small. I'm wondering, what would be the repercussions or your concerns about having those students integrated into a more, the next level up? A couple of years, well, now it's a couple of decades
More
ago.
heterogeneous
Couple of decades
grouping.
ago, there was all of the push for the integrated.
Inclusion,
Yeah.
inclusionary settings.
And I'm wondering, have we moved away from that, even in things like the English and social studies classes, where it's, the benefits of that inclusion are not seen as, or are you trying to get more individualized instruction for those?
So I think there's a balance. I think we have heterogeneously grouped settings in a few areas, a few targeted areas. We've removed the tracking in our social studies freshman course. We no longer have a topics course. It's just a U.S. history course. We have, and then in other areas we have, multiple tiers of multiple levels of instruction depending on student need. I think it's possible and it's appropriate in certain areas. I know this is a little bit of a generalized response, but I think there's certain areas, specifically in content areas such as mathematics, where the level of instruction and kind of specificity in what we're able to provide and meet student needs in a more tiered approach could not be met by a singular teacher in a mixed group setting. And I think what you would likely see is students' needs not being met.
Particularly in things like the math and stuff, where those concerns exist, would there be an opportunity to have the integrated class but have both teachers involved?
Yeah, so you will see that model used at times where you'll see maybe potentially a special educator push into a regular education course and provide supports for students on IEPs, which would be in addition to, like, say, a para support. This is someone who's actually providing instruction in a classroom setting. And that is a model that's utilized in different schools. There are shortcomings and downfalls to different ways of slicing that up, but I think
I was thinking more along the lines of intro to algebra with algebra, or intro to, where you have an intro. One of my concerns is that with introductory courses, and this is generalizing, it's almost preconditioning a student to just fulfill the requirement but not generate the interest. Whereas if someone is at the introductory level simply because of either lack of exposure or difficulty getting into it, being in with a group of students who may be more engaged might encourage them to continue with it. Just we can take it offline, but it's just an observation, and probably for another discussion. The only other thing I was questioning is we always frequently have the question about Latin. Does Latin seem to be growing or shrinking?
So in looking at, let me just pull up the tab, in looking at previous year's numbers, and
Seem a little bigger this year.
yeah, so they were a little healthier this year, which I accredit to our new teacher coming on board and building the program and making it a more attractive language for students to select. Having only spent a couple of months in the building to observe and gain some insights from other administrators who've been part. I think we're pretty pleased with what we've seen in the growth of the program, and we are both optimistic and our expectations that we'll continue that trend and we'll continue to grow that program back to some healthier
I'm
section
just wondering
sizes.
if we should start envisioning the possibility of higher level Latin either through regular class or a structured on-premises virtual class, so that if we can support this interest if it's there. So.
Yep, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
No, well done, thank you.
Well done. Great job. Thank you. Excellent. I appreciate it. Do you think we need the principals anymore?
That's totally your call, but I know I would support that.
Okay. So, gentlemen, you've done a fine job and provided us with a lot of information, and you are welcome to stay, or you can go home.
Thank you, Holly.
Completely up to you.
You're free to move about the country.
Yes. But I think there's a 5-month-old that might want to see its dad. So,
Your dad wants to
and
see
some
it.
other children who might like to see their other dad too. So, but the 5-month-old really matters to me right now.
It's debatable.
Yeah, you have a freshman in high school. She doesn't want to see you. Yeah, right. Yeah, my 5-month-old wouldn't. Okay, so moving forward to discussion. Looks like we have some of the fiscal year 2023 budget discussion. Oh yeah, that's right. We were going to talk about that this month and see if there's anything that we would like to share and go through and talk about and give you input, right?
There's actually two pieces for the 2023 discussion. One, I was hoping to see if there was anything specific from board members. We're basically concluding round 2, which is typically when we start to really wrap this up, and that's going to be what's going to the budcom. But at the same time, we have ESSER funding. So I wanted Gina just to kind of talk about that a little bit, because some of that funding will be utilized for what might have been historically something out of the operating budget. So we'll start with Gina going over that, so the board has an awareness of what we're looking at, how those funds are being used. And then if board members have something that they want to address for the FY23 budget, I'll take those suggestions, and then I'll work with Kelly tomorrow and start to incorporate those into the budget.
So I'm just going to tell a little story about the ESSER funding, because it's just been piecemeal, to say the least. And I'll go by the fiscal year that they are part of our grants management system. So if we go back to 2019-2020, we had CARES Act ESSER of $20,077.89, and we purchased 80 Chromebooks for remote learning. So that was the spring of 2020, and it's often difficult to purchase Chromebooks via a grant, so it was an authorized purchase, and we knew it was part of our tech plan anyway, so we went in that direction.
Is this anything that's in our packet that you're?
No.
No.
2020, 2021, we had ESSER 2. So the co-op was given $60,050.24, and that is good for a little over 2 years. So the purpose of this was to take a look at educational needs as a result of COVID, learning loss, diagnostic tools, to assess and address learning loss and learning gaps. Now I don't know what to play with. Improve indoor air quality. Clearly with $60,000, the improvement of air quality wasn't something that the co-op could really do with that. So what we did.
A lot of little trees.
So what we have done in terms of our allocation is we did some summer work. We did math and ELA directed work via online learning tool subscriptions. We had content-specific assignments pushed out by the teacher over the summer. And during the school year, we had the Summer Learning Academy, so we did data support, targeted math, ELA, cross-curricular skill deficits and gaps, and then social-emotional learning re-entry opportunities. So that was some of the adventure lure that was spoken of. An opportunity for our students who were fully remote last year to come back on campus and do something outside in the springtime, as well as our students who were already students, here. They could participate in that. We had some really great programming with some of our teachers providing sort of like a credit recovery model for our high school students who otherwise potentially would not have earned full credit, or certainly didn't earn credit at the level that would allow them to be successful in the courses this school year. And we did similar programming for math in the middle school. All right, so for 2021, 2022, we have basically ESSER 3 funding. So far, we've been allocated $89,010.44, but the total allocation will be $134,864. So for this, I sent out a survey, which I forwarded to you as board members, that just asked for community input for the funds. If you recall last spring, we had to do a couple of things. We had to submit a reentry plan to the state that was just very quick and answer a few questions. We also had to fill out, as part of that reopening plan, quick, what would you do with your ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds? So the possible uses were high quality diagnostic tools to address student learning gaps, inspection, testing, maintenance, repair, replacement, and upgrade to improve air quality, prevention and mitigation strategies for COVID, but a minimum of 20% had to be used to address learning loss. So with that in mind, our teachers last June completed a ton of work identifying learning gaps, learning loss, specific concerns with specific students, and then just more generalized concerns they could pass on to the next course. When the teachers came back in August, they were on the receiving end of those documents from their colleagues to figure out a plan for how would they address them within the classroom, and then what need would arise. Maybe it's a different resource, maybe it's a different testing diagnostic tool, and then allocate funds that way. So my early request that I put in was to decrease class size. And so what we did is we went from 0.8 to 1.0 FTE for one of our math teachers. We went from 0.8 to 1.0 for school counseling, and so that's where you heard about the additional 0.2 being allocated specifically to address social emotional learning needs across all curricular areas for teachers to kind of push in the classroom and bring awareness. I envisioned that the Learning Academy, especially at the high school, that model was so successful, I really envisioned that continuing.
The choices, is that the choices thing?
No, that was just, so we had Claire Perret and we had Devin Photo work with math students and English students to just bring them where they were and bring them where they needed to go. Some of that involved credit recovery. Some of that didn't. It just involved filling in some skill gaps. And then increased support for student devices, as the need for technology support has increased dramatically since the onset of the pandemic. So we had proposed a tech plan that we thought was going to be a 5-year tech plan. And then COVID hit, and then all of a sudden, with the most recent identification of funds for devices, we will be 1-to-1 across the entire SAU next year. So right now in our elementaries, every student has an SAU 41 device assigned to their student ID number, and they're in the classroom. Next year, we're just going to do that all the way through 12th grade, because it just makes more sense in terms of we have the technology, and if I'm pushing out an assessment, I push it out evenly. I know what tools they have, so in terms of supporting them, I'm not trying to go through a firewall or a filter that's been placed on their own device. So the idea is that it's a smoother transition, that we could have better support. But as a result of that, we have found that we just need more tech support, and so we were able to use ESSER 2 and then proposed use of some ESSER 3 to add an additional tech that sort of floats around all of our buildings, which certainly has come in more than handy this year. So that's where we are. Like I said, I put out a survey, and some feedback that I received was to utilize the money to support academics, to utilize the money to support reading and speech, to increase support for nurses, increase the number of counselors, to add a social worker, to increase our social emotional learning, to add funds for COVID testing. And if that was something that we were to go to, and the superintendent can discuss where we're at with that, but there are separate funding sources for that specific need. Increase support for students who are in isolation. So if they are currently positive and they are, learning from home via Google Classroom, additional supports potentially to reach out and see where they are. Support for more tech support, and then increased support for more outdoor time. So that's some of the feedback I got from the community so far. The survey is still open, so I'm still accepting additional feedback. But that's where we are with our all of those allocations.
Gina,
And
quick question.
yeah.
Does any of that, is there a problem? And if so, is it all addressed with internet access for students outside of school?
So that is a question that we asked our families. And there are resources to support any family that has, not these funds, but other funds, that does not have an internet connection at home.
So we've got,
So we can connect
we're
families.
ensuring parity in that area as well?
Yep.
Excellent, thank you.
Yep.
So, on top of what Gina's talked about, is the continuation of a couple of those pieces. Obviously, we'd like to continue the .2 in math because that lowered our math size numbers. We really believe that .2 guidance money is being very well spent, and we don't see this issue just ending because COVID goes away. In terms of talking with Tim, we are seeing kids who very much want a need for more PE because that's kind of their social emotional outreach and how they move forward. So we had been moving, and a number of kids were signing up for online or different, things that they could do in the community. But there is definitely kind of a need now where kids are saying they want to be in that small group. They want to be involved in the school with role models there. We are also, a big ticket item we had discussed last month with the board is a social worker position. So we'll be looking at putting that in and sharing that with BudCom to get that in the original budget. As Gina pointed out, a number of our tech issues have gone away. Some of our parking issues and paving issues and roofing issues have been accelerated. So there is still more to do, but we can kind of decide where we're at once we get to the overall pieces with the budget. We have a limited amount of textbook requests because Kelly has done a really good job of getting us on what I'll call a textbook schedule, so departments know when they're up and what's coming. We have a number of smaller items that benefit our classes, and I'll give you an example. We need some new sewing machines and fax. We need pianos tuned. So just some things that come up every so many years, you will see in this budget. In terms of, we talked about at the SAU board, our guaranteed maximum rate for insurance is 3.9%, and our dental actually went down, so that will help us there. And we're also looking, as we start to move this vision of what can we do more enhancing tech that will allow us to offer different things to students down the road. That's going to be changing over time, the smart boards and what some of our classrooms look like. We're going to continue with the tremendous physics program we have in the school. How do we take that to the next level and integrate that more? If we're looking at times struggling to offer all AP classes because of numbers, could we do virtually with another school near us and offer that and combine two different groups and figure out the logistics there? Brian has done a great job with the athletic budget. He has done a wonderful job managing the athletic fund. We have a couple big ticket items in terms of wrestling mats and volleyball poles and things like that that will be in the budget but may end up in the athletic trust. We are looking at the lower dirt parking lot and starting to do what I would call the prep work on that parking lot. It needs extensive gravel and things of that nature before we can actually pave it. But what I was hoping to get from the board is any other pieces that you have heard about from community members, maybe experienced because of your children being in the building, or items that need to go into the budget, because really once we get through round 2, we try not to do something new to the BudCom unless it's something that just comes up unexpectedly. So
this is your opportunity as board members to let the team know. Does anybody have anything they wanted to prioritize? Do we want to go around the room? Does everybody have something to say? No? I'm going to let you just decide if you want to speak.
The social worker position, is that going to be contracted or is that going to be an employee?
We'd like to start with an employee, because I'd like to get the connection and have them become part of the guidance department. And they would work with our guidance department, our FIMAS program, our Choices program, and kind of really that population. And again, it would be for any child that needs it. But when I just, off the top of my head, those are 3 populations that I can see us maximizing their efforts in.
For both the high school and the middle school?
Correct.
One person for both?
One person for both schools, and then see what the numbers do. We're making that same kind of discussion between Brookline and Hollis about doing something shared between the 2 districts at the elementary level, so that we have those resources and we can now prepare from a K-12 point of view, not just arriving at the co-op.
Anyone else? Tom?
A couple of things. One is we've recently had, and are probably going to have additional input about nursing.
Yep.
I'd be interested in potentially beefing up that staffing there if what we're seeing is that we're consistently or at least frequently understaffed. And that
Good point.
another thing is we have moved some items forward in the past 2 years. With the things that you're looking to add, I think there would be a benefit of perhaps taking a breather where we can.
Yep.
So that these new initiatives that are being proposed, particularly on the staffing level, which I conceptually support, aren't viewed as on top of.
Yep. Okay, good point. Thank you.
I mean, at the risk of sounding like I'm rubber stamping, which I'm not trying to do, I really, I agree with the technology. I really support that. I support the social worker. And I do feel like we've moved forward with a lot of our work that's needed to be done in the district with last year with the extra funds, which was great. And so I'd like to see our money in that direction.
Okay.
Would the social worker have some type of educational certification as well, or would they purely be a social worker? When I say, I'm even thinking guidance, because I just conceptually, I think it would be easier to get community support for a guidance counselor who has social work capability than just saying we're bringing a social worker into the building. I just don't know if those combination work.
It's a school social worker.
Again, it can be difficult. You may run into somebody who has those qualifications, but I think we'd be going out, and then to be honest with you, I think we'd put out the widest umbrella possible.
I'm even thinking of professional development, helping someone get certification.
Right. And then, because again, the right person may be more important than the actual certification to start with. Because again, if we're looking at this long term, it's kind of like we've done with many of our departments, building a department that down the road has the capacity to meet the varied needs. We don't want to necessarily just hire for a position and then 2 years from now it's kind of a change of position. We want to make it so that we're encompassing all students and then we meet the needs in that given year. So right now I could see that person doing a lot more with the outreach to families and working with those students who really struggled being isolated for 18 months. But in 2 years, that could be more of a focus around anxiety and what our seniors go through and how do we deal with all of those issues.
I think one of the big things we get saddled with is kids who are going through fairly significant transitions outside of school, and you know, we often get requests to help them address situations. So I think it's a great idea to have that capability. I just think it would be nice for us, especially if you're recruiting someone, to have the position defined in such a way that we would support them becoming credentialed in an area that's education-based, and it would be a good thing all around. I'll shut up.
No, I think those are great
No,
questions.
no.
I think that's a really great point. I'm just gonna, reiterate what I said last month, and, I completely support,
any additional mental health service that can be pushed into the schools, whether it's a licensed clinical social worker or whether it's a licensed school social worker, if that exists, but somebody who can help navigate these really trying times with mental health. And our school counselors are certified and they do a great job, but there's crisis work that's very specific to social work, and they can work directly. They provide a little bit better connection to, say, an out of a student who's seeing a therapist and that kind of thing. So I completely am glad to see that we're working towards that. The parking lot is, I think community members who happen to be in my world, because I happen to be the mother of a junior. So a lot of those folks are, frustrated with parking because their kids didn't turn 16 at the right time or whatever. I think it's great if we're going to add some parking, but I think one of the concerns with that parking lot, one of the reasons we stopped using it is surveillance.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would imagine that if we're going to open it up to students, that we would need to surveil it.
Mm-hmm.
And that we need some video systems in there, or else it kind of becomes, or we need staff willing to stand down there.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, when you have students coming in, with junior and senior options, it's tricky. So, and then I do know that there was a traffic concern with that too. So I'm all for providing a little bit more parking, but I don't think it should be a priority because we do provide busing.
Mm-hmm.
What were the services that were provided by Harbor Homes that are no longer there?
So the mobile crisis unit,
Yeah.
sort of taking over some of the Harbor Homes services
Okay.
that we contracted.
Thank you.
I have a couple things. Probably starting with the least important. Yeah, my concern is about that parking lot. The reason that we closed it was due to a safety concern. And I think that if we were going to increase the parking, we need to do it in the back of the building by the fields. Because, for example, we're going to have more night games because we have lights. But then we had a night football game where we had folks coming from those lower fields, and our parking lot's not well lit.
Mm-hmm.
So, you've got cars coming around, dropping kids off. And, I know this because I was dropping middle school age kids off,
Yep.
and then coming out, and there's people walking up the hill, and it's just pitch dark. So we just don't really have the parking facilities that we need to have night games behind us. So if we're going to put in anything, I think we need to think about that. And if we end up building it that way, then I think we've got to think about some lights. Because I just think we've got some safety concerns if we do that. This social worker position, I think I need to have clear understanding of the role and job description. And I wouldn't want to write the job description in such a way that it feels like the job would not exist in maybe a couple of years. And some clarity, I think, too, that makes and is respectful of folks in the public that don't think that the school should be providing these services. But I think the hook needs to be, how are these services necessary in order for the children to access the curriculum? Sort of that same standard that's used, to determine whether a child needs special services, student services. The reason we provide those services is because without the services, the kids cannot access the educational curriculum that we're providing. So we need to make sure that we explain the loop. I think that it's probably the fact that we need those services so our kids can access the curriculum, but I just think we need to make sure that we're mindful of crafting the position in such a way that
It makes it obvious.
I think
that
that's a
makes
great
it
point.
obvious.
Great point.
That,
Great
yeah,
point.
that it's clear. Because I don't want to become a health services
Or mental health
or a
services.
mental health
Gotcha.
services.
Mhm.
facility, because we're not. But we do have to educate the kids where they are, and
they
some
are
of
here
them
8
are
hours.
coming in with more needs and different needs than they may have been coming in the past. The last thing I want to mention is this board hasn't received a raise in stipends in well over 10 to 15 years. We are paid substantially by a multiplier less than other boards in the state. And we are asked to do more and more and more by the public, and we are under more scrutiny right now by the public and less respect of our time by the public than I think we ever have been in the 7 to 8 years that I've been on this board. And I certainly don't compare to Krista's experience or Tom's experience. But I think that seeing at least 2 times what we are currently be paid now would still make us still well underpaid by the state standards, but would probably make it more commensurate with the obligations. And most of us, I fortunately am not having to use it, but many years, every penny of my stipend went to pay for a babysitter so I could be here. But, we can laugh about it a little bit, but this has actual financial impact. Whether it's extra carry out for our kids so we can come here at 6 o'clock and be here, or babysitters or whatever. And this is a real commitment. And when the public insists that we should have more meetings and that we should be wanting to have public input for hours on end, et cetera, I just think it's at that point, it's important to recognize that we are a very underpaid board in this state, and we are a very high-performing district. So, and that's partially credited to each individual on this board, certainly credited to our teachers, our staff, and our administrators who are wanting to go home now. But that, I just think it's a point that we have to take in mind.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Liz. Anything else?
Just to add in, Liz said it a lot better, just the mental health part. I fully support looking at that role, but that's my only fear, was how you articulate and how it's used, because it's very, very easy to see and identify that, those supports are needed, but how you articulate it. And I'm just a little confused. I don't have the answer to that, but it's something that I've been thinking about a lot, and how we would best utilize that, because, we have limited resources and how to use them the best, but to get the support for that. And I think she brought up a good point too. It is a delicate line between, what we should be providing and what should be outside of school. And like I said, it's definitely a need. I'm a little confused myself, and I'm in the medical profession, so I'm a little confused exactly how it's going to be used, and use the most bang for our buck for that.
Okay.
I just reiterate again that we look at the whole thing and see if there's anything we can carve out as perhaps not mandatory, but desired to let HB Elevates try and fundraise.
Okay.
Because there are some things I've heard discussed which, especially in the area of support for some of our curriculum areas, that would be likely candidates for support from industry.
Yep.
Great.
I have another one.
Oh, sorry,
sure.
Cindy.
That's okay. Andy, at one point you mentioned the upstairs, the 3rd floor,
Oh, yeah.
that the facilities director said something about maybe being able to do something with the airflow up there. That would be a high priority for me.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Cindy, because it reminds me, what we look at for that, we'll probably do as a separate warrant article.
Okay.
Okay, because it'll probably be, I think, a decent price tag, and it might be something we have to phase in over time.
Okay.
So I know Kelly is getting a price on that, but I believe when you see the packet that'll go to BudCom, you'll see that as a separate warrant, just no dollar amount yet.
Okay.
Because that is one thing we did hear from the community.
Yeah, we
across
really
the board.
need something.
Yeah.
And is there anything in the actual numbers of what we have here that you want to call our attention to?
No, I think what I received from you folks tonight is validate some of the things that administration has been discussing. I think Tom's point about you know, the balance between the personnel and maintenance, and can we make that work is a very valid point, because we did take some significant step forward last year. The other thing that's going on is, as we know, enrollment's going to increase at the elementary levels. We're doing a kind of building study that is not necessarily designed to look at costs yet, but look at more of programming and spacing. So some of this may be packaged better 2 years down the road when you're looking at more of having to do something with your space. Because you're at 833 at the high school, I see that going up again, and I think that's seeing some space problems again in 3 or 4 years, just because of the natural numbers that are coming out of 3rd and 4th grade right now. So I think what I'll do next month is I'll bring back round 2 with some BudCom feedback, and then kind of, you know, work off of what are the priorities now that you see the numbers, because I think with the social worker in, everything we've talked about in pretty much, you're probably starting with a number that's probably somewhere between 4 and 5% for an increase, which may be a little larger than we'd like. But at the same time, we are also returning the money that Linda will talk about in a couple minutes.
It would be helpful as this discussion goes forward, just to have a little bit of insight as to what's going on in the elementary districts, to know if how it's all going to be adding up from the total package.
I agree on that. Yeah.
So now, are we up to?
We are now going to turn it over with the chair's permission to Linda, and she'll cover
Sure.
FY21 final numbers and FY22 first quarter.
You have my position.
Okay. Holly, get ready, this is your favorite part. It's
I love numbers,
okay?
Linda.
Holly, I'm going to go fast for you. So, starting with FY21, which ended June 30th, we did have our financial audit in August, was very successful, but with FY21, with the unprecedented year with the pandemic, definitely is reflected on the year-end balance sheet. So in round numbers, out of the $25 million budget, we did not spend over $2 million of that. The pandemic resulted in savings across the board in all categories: salaries, out-of-district services, stipends, contracted services, professional development, on and on and on. On the revenue side, we also had a balance, not quite as high. We had a balance of $31,000, higher than budget. So looking at the bottom line, our unreserved fund balance was projected to be $200,000, but we actually came in at $1.9 million. That's the amount that's going to be returned to the tax base to offset the amount that has to be raised through taxes to support the budget. And just in comparison with the prior year, the unreserved fund balance the prior year was $1.1 million. So that's a recap of FY21. FY22 started on July 1st, and I just wanted to mention that the business office has this big date, September 30th, where from the schools, we need to get in all the purchase orders for the current year for FY22, as well as the budgets for FY23 next year. And to give you an idea of the scope of this, in co-op so far, we've entered 865 purchase orders with almost as many vendors, and we entered budgets for over 500 expense account lines in co-op. And unfortunately, the principals aren't here, but I did want to publicly thank and commend our senior secretaries, Karen Kipp at the high school and Joanne Lake at the middle school, because without them, the business office just couldn't function. They support us in every way and have worked really hard to get us what we needed. So currently this year, it's very early in the budget, but most of it's projected. But out of the $26.3 million budget, we're projecting a little over $300,000 that won't be spent. Most of that savings lies in 3 areas. The health insurance rates coming in lower than the GMR. We had budgeted at 10.9%, and they came in like 1% or something very low. We had savings in special education and contracted and out-of-district services, and then savings, of course, in athletic and extracurricular stipends for activities that are not running this year due to COVID. So should be an anomaly. Hopefully we'll get back to full capacity next year. We're at this point projecting revenue to come right in on budget. So after funding the maintenance trust and retained fund balance, We have a projected fund balance for FY22 right now of a little over $38,000. Again, it's very early in the year, so these are all just projections. And all of your questions can go right to Superintendent Corey. He's ready for you.
Just a little bit, as you know, one of the things that Kelly, Linda, and Donna Smith have done really well across the SAU is mandate the encumbrances so that we know right out of the gate where we are. We have all our special ed costs. Everything is covered as of right now. Then what typically happens is we will decide maybe not to make a purchase, maybe money Amy had set aside for a child. That child no longer needs that services. So typically what's happened is that money has gone up over time. And, you know, from the 2 years that we dealt with COVID, 2 years ago and last year, you know, I'm very proud to say under Kelly's leadership, you know, we returned $3 million from the co-op budget over those 2 years, 1.9 from last year and 1.1. Typically, since I've been here and Kelly's been in the leadership role, we really, our budgets have done really, really well because we've used about 97% of the funds. And I know that sounds to some people like you're still off by a little, but you're doing a budget 18 months out and you don't know what student's going to walk in the door or what services are going to be needed. So I do want to take a moment and just thank all the ladies who work on the second floor because it's a constant, it's a never-ending job up there with POs and working with principals, especially when all of a sudden it's like, I forgot that I need this, and now Linda and Donna have to go find the money and work with Kelly to make that happen. Are there any questions on FY21 or first quarter of 22?
Two things. One is it would be helpful, just because I can't keep track of it, to also get a summary of the various contingencies and the other separate funds that we have and what our balances are and those, just the trusts and those funds.
Okay.
The other question is, did we have any exceptional unbudgeted new student demands on the co-op?
No, and I want to make sure I give Amy, Bob, and now Lauren credit because what they've done is they've built the capacity to the programs. So many of you know that we've had what's called a NEC program at the middle school. Our population now is starting to age into the high school. So next year you'll see in the budget transitioning of that program to the high school, so it will be now 7 through 12. And I say that because although those costs are there, and I'll give you an example, we will need to add days for 3 paras. So we'll spend probably about $20,000 so that those students have their services 220 days a year as opposed to 180. But that $20,000 allows us, or we have cost avoidance of having students go out of district. And just to give you an example, we did have one case not in this district, but in our SAU this year, where a student moves in or a student moves out, and it's a swing of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's something that we try to plan for, and that's why we really developed a special ed trust fund. And I think Amy's vision, and Lauren, Amy, and I met the other day, and they're already kind of crafting how this social worker type position will fit into servicing all students, so that we're not duplicating efforts between FIMUS in this position or choices in this position, and how they restructure. So we'll be sharing that with BudCom and probably this board at some point. But we could definitely bring the balances forward for you.
You had mentioned at the SAU governing board meeting that we're actually tuitioning some students into special education programs. Is that true in the co-op?
We haven't started tuitioning special ed students based on capacity for our programs. We get inquiries all the time. But I'll give you an example of, say, the Choices program or the FIMUS program. Our student population in Hollis Brookline is maximizing that, and FIMAS is set at 12 students, but we get regular calls. What we saw this year for the first time at the elementary level is there's a significant need for self-contained programming for very young students, 3 and 4 years old, that are coming. And so we have started to work with our boards there and form relationships. And I think that's something that, from an educational point of view, districts are going to have to cooperate more with each other, because we're also seeing less and less programming as many of these special schools that were developed over the long haul have struggled to stay afloat staffing-wise and budget-wise. So we have a number of students who we have to transport to Massachusetts, so the more we bring the programming in, we would see a significant cost just in transportation alone.
Cost avoidance.
Cost avoidance, yep.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Kristen.
I really do want to congratulate our business office and Kelly and Linda specifically, because seriously, you guys do such an amazing job giving this information to us every month, and you give it to us so clearly and concisely. Every month, we know exactly what is happening and where money is, and it's really important not only for the board, but for the taxpayers to be able to see this money, and it's really, really appreciated because you make it very easy, it's very transparent, and it's very appreciated.
Thank you so much.
Really
Appreciate
doing
that.
a phenomenal job. And also just want to reiterate, $1.9 million going back to the taxpayers, 1.9. I want a banner. I want a banner. Because that's really important, because I do think we're very careful with our budgets. And the majority of people, the 60 to 65% that vote for our budgets, believe that as well. But there is a part of the population that believes that we're very careless with the money, and that we aren't careful with what we're doing. And I think that this shows how careful we are, where the money's go, and when it can go back, and it is being returned, and so the taxpayer can enjoy that. How much are we returning to Hollis and to Brookline as well? I know we talked about it at the SAU, but I just want
Yeah, Hollis is 870,000 plus a little bit, and Brookline is 517,000 plus a little bit. So overall, across the SAU, it's a return of $3.3 million.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Chris has got a great point, that not so much on the savings side of it because we didn't save it on purpose.
Right,
We saved it
right.
because,
Right.
but the fact that despite what people may assume, we don't look at it as a bonus that all of a sudden, oh, we've got money to burn.
Right.
If we don't need it, we're giving it back.
Absolutely.
I wanted to say this similar thing that Krista just said, but mostly, Linda, I really appreciated the way you presented that tonight.
Thank you.
Quickly, efficiently, and I understood it, which, that's really a big deal. So-
Thank you.
Same. But can I counter this with a little bit? It's great that we're returning the money. That doesn't mean we should budget significantly less.
Correct.
Agreed.
The fact that we were able to not spend it all is a good thing, but we can't just simply cut $1 million out of our budget and assume that next year is going to be a repeat of 1 or 2 years behind us.
It's a windfall. It's not something that is ongoing.
No, and what the public should expect is good stewardship and transparency, not decreased budgets.
Yeah, exactly what you said. They should compare the proposed budget to last year's budget, not last year's expenditures, or this year's expenditures, because the expenditures are the anomaly.
Exactly.
Great.
Okay, moving over to the SAU. Some of you heard this at the SAU meeting, but I just wanted to go through it at each of the board meetings, because we usually get different audiences tuning in. We are proposing an FY23 budget of $2,107,176 for the SAU budget, which provides the services, both business, HR, curriculum, supervision, across the 3 school districts. In terms of that dollar change, it is going up from last year's budget, $149,579. In the budget, the SAU has what's called an adjusted budget and then a proposed budget. When I look at the adjusted budget, which is just all our contractual obligations moving forward 1 year, that's $2,018,210. When we look at the proposed budget, we have a baseline of $2,014,538, which is a 2.9% increase. That's basically what I'd propose if we weren't moving anything forward. What we are asking for is a communication specialist, and both at the SAU board, and I'm sure at the boards that I speak to later this month, they want more specifics around that. I just want the community to know this is not intended to be another layer to get in the way of communication. Pretty much anybody who emails me, calls me, or wants to see me is able to do that. That won't change with this person. It may actually increase, because what this person will be doing is a lot of the tasks that fall under our assistant superintendent or our superintendent or our business manager that involve communication. And what I mean by that is school board agendas, things that, we want to get out to the public so they have the information. Also things like, as Tim presented tonight, I mean, it's quite a feat to have 3 national merit students. We have gotten accustomed to that, but we need to do a better job of tooting our own horn from a K-12 perspective of all the wonderful things that go on. So we will be bringing more specifics around the position and the expectations. That position, salary and benefits, is $76,638. And then the other piece that would be kind of, if we had to make cuts to the SAU budget, is the board has been trying to adjust salaries of SAU employees to make sure they are competitive. I'll give you a current example. Anybody who works in the IT field realizes it's very difficult for us to be competitive with what's out in the industry. So we made a conscious decision, and over a 3-year cycle have increased that individual's salary rate so that we can retain them and not lose them to either another district or the private sector. The board had asked a couple years ago to put that in as we were doing the adjustments, and there's really 2 pieces to that the SAU board will discuss. We could decide not to put that into the proposed budget and use the unreserved fund balance, or decide to keep it in there. So I just wanted to call those 2 out, because really, if the community didn't pass a communication specialist and the board decided not to put the additional salary money in, our proposed budget would be less than the adjusted budget, which is something that we would get if the voters voted down the SAU budget. The SAU budget is dealt with by an SAU budget committee, which has members of Hollis Budcom, Co-op Budcom, Brookline Finance. They have a board member from each of the boards, as well as SAU representatives. And that group supported this budget. We have some of the same questions that the SAU board asked about the communications position, but the budget subcommittee has kind of supported that, and we'll be discussing it with their overall Budcom and Hollis Board and Finance committees as we move forward. So there'll be more information in the coming months. The public hearing for the SAU budget will be December 16th. The location is not finalized yet. We're just working around COVID and, believe it or not, basketball and all the things that we run in our schools that are for kids.
Yay.
So it may be here, it may be at CSDA. We'll know more in the next couple weeks. And that's it for the SAU budget.
Andy, can I ask you a question about the communications person?
Yep.
At the SAU meeting, a few different people described what they viewed the role of that person being, and we haven't fully articulated it, but my recollection is that a significant portion of the communications that you're speaking of are things that must be done required by law, postings, communications to the courts, communications to the public and to parents, things of that nature. Perhaps it would be enlightening and more accurate to call the position compliance and communications, because communications in the grander scheme, as I mentioned in the meeting, evokes an image of PR. But a lot of the communications that you're saying need to be fulfilled by this individual are meeting the compliance requirements of the SAU with RSA. And I'm not looking to put spin on this, but if that is in fact a major portion of the responsibilities, I think it's important that that be articulated. These are not discretionary activities, and perhaps more importantly, they're not activities that are automatically that the people currently doing them are the best qualified to be doing them.
Well, it sounds to me like the more you're discussing what it is, rather than what I think the public tonight complained about, is this person's not a PR person. This is really, I think, more what the Amherst School District has. It's like an executive assistant. You don't have a secretary. You don't have an administrative assistant that is really your sole administrative assistant, and that is different in this district than it is other SAUs. So this person, I don't want to downgrade it to say they're just an administrator, but they are, like, it's really an executive assistant type position that is going to include compliance issues, communication issues, making sure things are properly posted, all of those sort of things. But it's really to make sure that everything that you and Gina and your staff need to get out the door is done properly. And it's so, I don't know, I think there's some work on the drafting the scope of the position in such a way where it more accurately communicates what it is. It's not really a communications director.
So we need to communicate more effectively about what we want to hire someone to do, hence the name.
Well, I mean,
Right.
I think maybe,
what it is.
I don't know I can't recall. I do remember when the new superintendent posted for that position in Amherst like 3 years ago, but kind of go back, look at what that position was posted for, because I remember thinking, we need this person in the SAU, and this job description is what we need. And so let's go back and look at it and see what we can borrow from them. They're our friends anyway, they like to help us out. But I think that may be a good place to start, and then we can spin it and add the additional things that we need in this district.
Yeah, great suggestion.
So I'm visualizing it, and from how you described it and how I've been picturing it, as someone who's communicating output, not someone who's going to be standing in the way of people trying to give communication input. This person isn't going to be standing there taking your calls and answering.
No.
They're just trying to give more information, not slow down the information coming to you. That's how I would see it. So more of an output communication.
They're not a layer.
Right.
They are, in fact, a reliever to free you up.
That's how I see it.
But in the same way that, I mean, we need to get a communication out, so, it needs to be somebody who is somewhat adept at, crisis communication as well, because they may need to put together a first draft of an email that is eventually going to go out with your name on it.
Right.
That, I am walking out the building to the high school because there is something going on. The person needs to know that's what's going on. They'll be in contact with you maybe by however, and then when you get back and communication has to go out to the public, that communication's already started to be crafted. Right. You're not sitting there trying to do it after. Those are the things that we're talking about. That's communication, compliance, and all of that wrapped in together. Yep. So it's going to be hard to hire for this job.
Yep.
And it's going to require us to find the right person.
Right. No, I think all the points that have been made are actually very helpful to us, because you are bringing up points that I see myself sitting here and saying yes, and I know Gina's agreeing too. Because, again, it is about, just like today, it was a communication that went out during the board meeting about another COVID case, but it needed to be different wording because it's a different situation. So that means at some point today, Gina and I need to stop whatever is on the plate and take care of that. Well, you make a very valid point. It would be nice to just be editing or making a change there than constructing.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and that's why these people are experts at this. I mean, you know, you can look for somebody who's got an expertise in nonprofit public communications, which is why people get so confused and go right to PR, because PR is a for-profit kind of position that a company or a corporation has. This is a nonprofit public communications where you're dealing with law and all of the different pieces of a puzzle that you need to put together. So
Yeah, no, I agree with what everybody said, but that is exactly what I was going to say, is that PR, it is a PR position in my opinion, and it is incoming information, outgoing, and all of the legal and the good news and the sharing of all that, but PR in an educational system is so different, and I think that's
nonprofit.
right, and exactly, it's not trying to
It's
cover up
not
'cause somebody
marketing.
had food
It's
poisoning,
not
it's not
marketing.
marketing,
You're not
it's
trying to sell
not,
something. You're trying to get people the
no.
information that they need about the school district and the
Right.
schools.
Yeah,
Right.
and,
Support
you
the
know,
transparency
support
everyone
the-
sees.
Right.
It is
Exactly.
exactly what it is.
This is support that a high-performing district simply needs.
Yeah.
Andy should not be fixing his own grammar mistakes in an email that's going to go out. And we love you, Andy, but.
no, I don't, because I don't do grammar. I let Tina do the grammar. I
We
do the
noticed that
numbers.
they have,
Beth has a little more.
Well, yeah, I wasn't, but I agree with that, I guess, but that's exactly what I said even at a governing board, is there's other people in New Hampshire doing it, but this is across the country. This is the first school district my children have attended that we don't have this. So I think it's just understanding and utilizing those other, looking not just in New Hampshire, but what other people use, because it really is still a PR, but I think we just need to change the.
It's not really called public relations in.
Exactly, in
education.
education, it's just different, so.
I think the most important thing is that, and Liz touched on it, we've had public input now at both meetings that implies that the purpose is to stop transparency, and that is not the purpose. The purpose is we're already transparent, but to make that transparency broader, wider, seen by more, and to keep the compliance factor with all of the different postings, because we do have so many legal pieces. So I
I
think
thought the
it's.
public comment was actually far more negative. I think that it was almost that we're trying to spin or sell the public a false good, which I don't think at all is what is going on here. So I'm just going to be much more blunt about it.
Yeah, that's good. That's why we love you, Liz. A little bit of bluntness is a good
Always here
thing.
just to be honest.
Okay.
I'm tough when it's the other way too.
I really appreciate it. Okay. I think we need a 2-minute recess, 3-minute recess.
We have 3 minutes to stay
3
on
minutes,
schedule.
3 minutes. It's a 3-minute recess.
Sorry.
Are you the process observer now?
No, no. We've already sold the right thing.
So mics are back on. We're back out of recess. I'm going to need a motion to accept the second reading of policy JLDBB, suicide prevention.
So moved.
Moved by Beth, and I need a second.
Second.
Oh, who was that? Krista. I think Tom had raised him. So, Beth is sort of the presenter on this one, so are there any changes for us to kind of?
Not really, no, just big thanks for the presentation tonight, that should help connect it. Oh, I was gonna answer, you had asked real quick during that about approving it, and the plan had to be approved initially, but then it says every 2 years, administration has to review it and has to present it to the board for review, but it doesn't actually say anything about approving it
Okay,
every 2 years,
right.
it just the initial time was approval. So just to answer that question, but no other changes. I think the only difference between now and the last time we met is this has now been shared with the school nurses at the middle school and high school and the high school counseling department, just because we figured they are, people that should have an eye on this and no further feedback from them. So it is as written, and I know that we usually will pull off those extra other resources at the end, because those extra resources at the end are awesome, but they are websites that could at any time not be a good link or things. So, but I've left them in there for the reading, so I assume you'll want those pulled off at the end. But everything else is as is. So second reading, no changes.
Is this different than what's currently in place?
This is a brand new policy
Okay.
that has never been in place.
Okay.
So we had the one that was labeled suicide prevention, but is actually in fact a different policy we've now renamed. So this is actually just to be
Okay.
in compliance with having a policy, and I think, we've mentioned before that we've always had some sort of level of procedures, but now with the law a couple years ago, we've had to update our procedures, and we are required to have a policy. So this brings us into compliance to have a suicide prevention policy.
Is there any reason this can't be like second and final?
It could, if somebody wants to amend
Had
it.
good eyes on it.
That
I
could
don't
be
know.
their
if-
I wasn't
We
sure.
haven't made any substantive changes between.
There have not been any substantive changes, but because I just didn't know if we wanted to make it second and final before we approve we can, before we approve the plan.
Has this been reviewed by any legal person for compliance with RSA?
This was the recommended from the state level, this is.
Okay, so we haven't modified that?
No, it's, the only modification we made or change is in the very, under district suicide prevention plan, under A, in the draft proposal, it had like A through J of very specific things the plan had to include, but we talked about just referencing that it had to be in compliance with the law, because the law may change the plans, and instead of having to come in every year and say, oh, we've got to change B, let's just say that our plan has to comply with the law.
I'm just
So
wondering.
that's the only thing that's different, is we took that out and referenced the law. And I know Brookline was talking about doing the same, but hadn't made a decision, I don't know.
It's going forward without A through J.
Okay, oh, without A
Yep,
through
next
J
week.
there, okay, perfect.
Has anyone passed it by either the NHSBA or?
So this
It's
was
from them.
the NHSBA
But
Not the
sample
legal.
with
policy.
it, with all the stuff in it, and I just want to make sure that taking that stuff out doesn't in any way
Okay.
upset compliance.
So why don't we just pass this for second reading? We can ask that question. Beth can bring that back and make sure that we're okay. And then hopefully we can do a third and final next month. Does that solve that?
If that is yet to be done, then yes.
I understand the question, I will get an answer to it.
Any other comments on that? All in favor? 600, motion carries. Next one is,
You, animals. in the
Animals.
yes, animals in the classroom. So I need for some reason, she's writing it now, she writes the amendment to include all of this other stuff. And I don't think we need to do that. Can't it just be motion to accept the second reading
As presented.
as IMG as
There was one I
presented?
didn't understand at all. with the
Yeah,
reference, so I
I'm
think
trying to
that's
read these,
better.
so I need a motion to accept policy IMG for second reading
As presented,
as presented.
so moved.
Moved by Tom, seconded by Beth. So this one is me, unfortunately. Okay, so
We read through the minutes, listened to the comments, and made changes that were recommended in the minutes. Not every change was made. We made as many as we thought would work. We changed some of the language from just leashed in an appropriate, leashed, caged, or contained, and we made that the change in number 5 was just kind of grammar. And then in animals on the school ground, we changed and included members of the public because we had children, parents, and staff, but we figured that members of the public should be instructed to keep animals off the school grounds during school hours. And then we, again, made it leashed or properly contained after school hours, and that owners are responsible for their pets' behavior, and all of this was pretty much what was recommended or asked of us. We changed it from or playing surfaces to designated surfaces. Instead of delineated, we changed it to designated, assuming that they would be designated on signs. So I'm ready for the changes that you, did we ever, I made the motion, do we ever?
Yeah, second, yep.
Yeah.
Did we ever accept it for second read?
It was accepted.
Wait, why
for
don't-
second, I thought,
Before we
on
take
the
a
15th.
vote, why don't we see if there's any
Or
other
first,
changes?
First.
I think we can take the vote after. Can't we talk about it first and then take the vote? Discuss the motion.
The
I always-
motion was made and seconded.
Right.
So we
Now
need
we're
to
in
just
discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
thought we
always
were
get confused because we always take the
So,
vote first.
Under animals on school grounds, children, I don't remember our policies usually use students.
Okay. Happy to change that.
And probably the same change needs to get made in 5. I think it's a global change.
I think, this is yeah. So just take out children and change it to students.
Yes.
Because if they're a child, but they're not an actual student, they're still a community member, so they're still covered under that,
They
correct?
are
Okay,
covered.
just making sure, okay.
Well, yeah, in 5, it's for the protection of everybody.
Right. Anything else?
Is there any reason we
Teacher,
can't?
but not the-
Is there any reason we could not pass this as final? We know how this vote's gonna go. I mean, we could sit and wordsmith it for another month, but I think we could probably,
Okay, let's do that.
so we could make a
are you
motion
making a-
Moving to
as
amend it.
appro-
Because you want to change the language from what's.
yeah, as amended, so as amended to change the words the child to students, and it approved for second and final reading. Would
So
be the
Liz
motion.
is making a motion to make an amendment to make the second and final reading. Is there a second? And with the changes of children to students.
I just, I know it's a stupid thing to say, but are we covered if we have a 2-year-old that's not a student?
They're a community member.
They're a community member.
That's what I was
Member of
saying,
the
they're a community
public.
member,
Got
yeah, a
it.
member of the
And they're a
public.
student in the classroom anyway, and then they're a 2-year-old, they're a community member, so.
Thank you, okay.
A member of the public, actually. It's not community member because it could be somebody who doesn't live in our town. So, there's an amendment that's been motioned. Would someone like to second that motion? Beth seconded that. So I just want to make sure Dawn hears that. So Liz made the motion. So all those in favor of the amendment to make this a final reading
And
That's-
not only final reading, but to make the change.
and adoption, right? Final reading and adoption. Okay, so that's 6. 6-0, amendment carries. Now we need to take a vote on the policy, which would be now a second reading and adoption. All those in favor? What? Sure.
Wait a minute. Liz, do you still object to the policy overall as written?
Yeah.
Because because it's not a uniform denial?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the only thing that would satisfy you, is if they just couldn't be ever here? Okay.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, 5-1-0, motion carries. I'm actually proud of us that we're not always unanimous, that's good. 5-1-0.
On that note.
I'm proud of us that we're not always unanimous. Okay, 5-1-0, okay. Next one.
Public participation, that's a good one again.
Okay, this is a me one again. All right, so I need a motion
for, what reading are we on this one?
Second.
Second reading. I don't think there's a lot of changes.
BEDH.
BEDH, can we make this one second and final as well?
Sorry.
I don't think we should.
Okay.
I think this one has.
Okay, so we won't make this one second and final, we'll go through the, so I need a motion to accept for second reading policy BEDH, public participation at board meetings, as presented.
Wait, why are we making it second and final?
No, I didn't make it second and final, I
No,
made
I'm
it second.
asking why aren't we doing
Because
it?
Tom doesn't want to.
Because we've had a lot of public, not a lot, we've had some significant input to this. And it's not clear to me that we're at the final stage necessarily. So, that's why.
So the motion on the floor is for, did anybody make the motion? Okay, so Tom made the motion and Beth has seconded it.
Doesn't mean that when we're when we're progressing in this discussion, that amendment can't be made, but right now, I don't want to assume that.
Okay, so this one was me too. This is the discussion portion. On number 3, I listened to the public input and decided that we, as a policy committee, talked about eliminating the word decrease. So speakers will be given 3 minutes. There's an opportunity for the board to increase the amount of time that speakers speak, but the board can't just decrease that. So it's 3 minutes minimum. And then there was just a little cleanup in the fact that policy BEDH can't be referenced because it is policy BEDH and I meant policy BEDB. So those are the only changes, but this was, obviously revised quite a bit from the first time. This is the second read. Are there any comments? Questions?
I'll just say, I appreciate and agreed with taking out the decrease just because people plan and prepare speeches. So to do that in the last minute would potentially impact a message trying to be shared with the board. But just to repeat, and I won't hash on because I know we don't always agree, I just think that this is a limitation. I think that, people should be able to speak to the school board about the programs, policies, and operations. So that's why I don't support it. But no changes from me.
You don't support it because we have the specific
Just
limitation that we can ask the board to, ask the public to not. Reserves the right to limit public discussion at board meetings to agenda items only.
Yes.
So we have the right to do that limiting in this policy.
Well, I guess they reserve the right, but that's where I'm unclear, is I'm not sure when you're deciding to reserve that right and how that's done, and I just, in general, like I said, I 100% agree with limiting to agenda items for special meetings, for warrant, like all kinds of special stuff, because we're coming together for that, and I definitely understand, like, there's been a very big shift in the last year or two. Even Liz referenced it, like the demand for time and all that. It really is a lot. So I'm not appreciating that. I definitely do. But I think that this is a regular meeting, like a once a month meeting is the one time. And we really limit ourselves on positive things too. I've had people say, please just don't limit it because of that. They've come to our board meetings and heard they should only speak on the agenda when they wanted to bring something positive just to highlight something, and we can't do that because we've limited that. So that's why, but I do
Thank
understand,
Thanks for that. Anyone else? Okay, I'm just gonna call the vote. All those in favor? Second read?
Can I just ask? I'm sorry, but based on the way the discussion has
Sure.
gone, does someone want to propose at this point that it be amended to be second and final? That's my question.
I will, because I think the same I think the last 2 months, my point is, the last 2 months, I think we've rehashed the same conversation.
Sure.
I
So-
think the vote will be the same this month or next year on this policy.
Okay, so you're putting forth an amendment to make this second and final.
Final.
Is there a second? So Cindy seconds. So all those in favor of amending the motion to be second and final reading? 6-0. Okay, we should just start with that. Okay, and then now a vote on the motion, which is the
policy
itself. All those in favor? All those opposed? 5-1. We are just hitting this 5-1, motion carries.
Here,
Okay.
Gina, this is a faster way to do policy.
It is, just accept them. Okay, so we are up to student discipline, right? So now I need a motion to accept the third reading and adopt policy JICD, student discipline and due process. Motion by Beth. Second? Tom.
I can, do you want me to?
Yeah,
say
I
this?
don't think we mean.
So this is something that, this is basically, just to summarize, this is kind of, I guess, Mr. Garzone and Mr. West have worked on this quite a bit. They kind of summarized in the past that this is kind of like 3 policies rolled into one: student conduct, student discipline, student due process. This has been through legal, it's been through policy, and since our last meeting, there's been no major changes. I have one question myself as an individual, but just to kind of give that background, this is really pretty much as is from the last time that the board saw it. There have been no major changes. I believe Mr. West was just working on a little bit of formatting. There are so many sections and indents and everything, so he worked on that, but that's the only thing. No actual content changes were made since last month.
Great. Are there any comments? You had a question?
I just had one comment, and I apologize for not catching it sooner. The last change that was made was when our principals at both high school and middle school went through and just kind of put in when it was something that the principal had, had a privilege to work on, or their designee. So they added the or designee, but historically, since I've been here on the board, we say or their designee. To me, when you just say the principal or designee versus the principal or their designee.
So you want to add the word there before every time?
For every time, just because I feel like it means that they're designating it.
So I think we can make that change.
It says who's actually got the privilege to designate.
You can make that change as part of the motion.
Absolutely.
Okay, so,
Well,
I already made the
along that
motion.
line,
Well, we already
I
made
think
it.
this is the one that has a residual his or her.
I think they made those changes
We
already,
made
though.
those changes, and I didn't see
thought
that in this read.
One of them I was going through and had, I just would
Oh, I can
suggest that
definitely
we go through and do it.
Okay, I thought that they had, but we can definitely make a note of that.
So, you'd like to make a motion to amend the motion to include there before designee?
Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Sure.
That was my question.
All those in favor of that, we've got a motion, are you gonna second that? To put the there designee in there? I mean, we're amending the motion, so let's do
Well,
that.
I just don't know if we need.
Do we need to amend the motion? Yeah, I'm not very good at this piece, so
I
no.
think we're gonna have another read of it, so I would just.
No, this is third and adopt.
Oh,
This is our third.
I thought you said that Mr. West
this
was
is
coming
third
back
and
with
adopt.
some more.
He did, no, he already did, like the formatting, but there were no words, no language change. So we saw that, a little bit of confusion, we saw this in May, and we had a
Okay,
first read,
I
and
thought you
then.
said So
we're at third
This
and
actually
adopt.
is our third.
So I would hold off, because I have some questions that may,
May change the adopt.
if we want to do anything more.
Okay.
rather than
So hold off on what? Okay, go ahead,
There.
ask your
doing-
questions.
Doing just a there. What section is this? The one where it says, a long-term out-of-school suspension may be imposed for, one of the things is possession of a firearm, BB gun, or paintball gun. I understand what we're trying to get to there. I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to just have use a description like real or simulated weapon, because there are all sorts of things, is a knife or a machete allowed?
Long-term suspensions.
Which one, where is it?
It's
It's
under
section Roman numeral 4, but the next page, B, long-term suspensions, the third bullet of the second paragraph.
So keep in mind that this was reviewed by our attorney, and so I'm assuming that language may have been,
I think it comes right out of the RSA.
The BB gun or paintball gun?
I think that's like
Look like a
the
weapon.
problem we had with the tobacco one when it didn't reference vaping.
Yep.
I think that it's awfully specific, and although the intent is understood, I'm not sure whether it fulfills the intent.
It could limit, if it could be argued that this is not a BB gun, a firearm, or a paintball, but it looks like something along those lines. I get what you're saying, yeah.
I mean,
are you
It's a fair
looking,
question.
Gina, to see if
I'm
it's in the
trying to look
RSA?
in.
I feel like we had this reviewed by the attorney, and I feel like that's where the majority, that's a kind of a substantive change that you're suggesting.
I agree, but I also don't think that it's, if we're going through all this work, should we?
Okay.
And what do you want to say, Tim?
I'm wondering if you want a more generic but descriptive thing, like a weapon or simulated weapon.
What if we just said, or similar? Or similar weapon?
I just want to make sure, I don't want to make any change to it tonight. I think that this would basically put us back to third and just third reading, because I think we need to make sure that that's not,
Oh, I think it is
Holly, I
something.
think that's, like,
you're pretty guaranteed, okay.
like, seriously, yeah, I think if you said something to the effect of, or similar item, that's not changing the legality
So you
of
just
this.
add or similar item to the list?
Or
To the list.
Or similar item added to the list. I just didn't want to take the list out.
And then, I just want to add into the discussion of this, and we've had the situation in the past, I just want to make sure that this exception is covered. This is the default, what happens, but it does, my understanding of having read it is it does give discretion to the administrator to not impose the suspension. We live in a community where people hunt.
Yep.
And,
Actually, the statute says any student in New Hampshire who possesses a pellet, BB gun, rifle, or paintball gun in a school zone may be expelled by the
right,
local board.
It says may. So for instance, let's say, like what happened with the kid with the.
I think it's 19313,
The
Gina.
bullet falls out, or they've got it in the trunk of their
Yep.
car, and they forget that it's there, and they rush to school, and they can legally have it, but they shouldn't have brought it onto school property. I don't want you to have to expel the kid because of a mistake.
It says may.
We don't.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
No, I
That's my
can
question.
guarantee you, because we have had situations where maybe father and son have gone to the shooting range and did that exact mistake, and the child will come into the principal's office and say, this is what's in my car, this is why. And that's why it's great to have an SRO, and we just go through it from that standpoint, and the parents come, and it all works out.
Okay,
So it's-
I just want to make
Yep.
sure that that's the.
No, you absolutely have that discretion.
So do we want to add or similar item and then adopt? Is that what you're saying, Liz? Keep the reference
If
to paintball
nobody
guns?
cares, I'm not going to vote against it because of those words, but I.
So the statute actually says pellet, BB, rifle, or paintball gun.
We don't have pellet in there, but that's exactly to your point, is what if somebody brings a pellet gun to school? Could they argue that
Just put or
it's not in
similar,
there,
I
so.
agree.
Where is this again?
It's the bullet under B.
Four
It's the
B.
third page of the
4B.
policy.
I think Liz's point or similar item,
Okay, so let's add,
Right there.
I mean,
Right there, that's bullet there.
do we want to add
Possession
the
of a
word
fire-
pellet, since the statute says it?
I think we're similar.
I
item
certainly,
gets at the-
I'm much more worried about a pellet gun than a BB
okay,
gun. I've
so,
been shot by both.
so let's add amended.
There's not much difference in them anymore.
Oh, yeah.
policy discussion.
Pellet gun
Okay,
is basically
okay,
like a
so
22.
let's add comma,
We have pellet guns that are not
gun,
like,
or similar item. Can we,
You can just put or similar?
or similar item?
BB gun, paintball gun, comma, pellet gun, or similar item.
I
Okay.
think that's the best.
So we're going to amend the motion to include those amendments. Do we need to vote on that, or do we just vote on the?
Is that the only, was that
So
Tom's
Got my
question?
there.
The there
Principal
and
or
that.
there
And
doesn't.
the
Okay.
his
embellishment
So
of the
let's,
description
let's,
of-
let's amend the motion to,
I'll withdraw the
in-
motion.
what are you withdrawing?
I'll withdraw the original motion.
Okay,
and make a new motion.
okay, good. So then make the new motion. Go ahead. I need a motion to accept as third reading and to, let me look at it, for third reading and adopt policy JICD, student discipline and due process, with two amendments, the following amendments. Changing, adding the word there before the word designee, and including in section 4B, the bullets, a comma after the words paintball gun, and including pellet gun and similar item, Or similar item, sorry, not and, or similar item. That's the motion. Would anybody like to second that? Beth and, who's?
Am I seconding
similar weapon.
Oh, Tom made the motion. Tom made the motion, Beth
I think it's
second.
similar item, I think it's singular.
Yeah, singular.
Or similar
Because
item.
everything else is.
Okay, all in favor?
voting.
6-0. That's been adopted.
Two
So-
off your plate.
Thank you for your patience.
Oh, no problem. I mean, I lose my patience, as you can tell, but I did my Zen moment for a second, so. All right, now what are we up to?
We got 3. The next one is board member.
Oh, yeah, because.
Why don't I have that one in here?
It's on the back
Right
side.
after that one.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Oh, I see it. Okay, sorry. Okay, so next this is first reading. I need a motion to accept first reading of policy BCB, board member conflict of interest as proposed. Moved by Tom, seconded by Beth. So we discussed this last month, but we didn't, as a way to advise policy committee. So what I did to address what we suggested last month is to change the word "a salary" to be compensation, for which compensation is paid. So that would cover board members doing, in any capacity, earning money that's paid to them from the board for, duties
From
that
the
they,
school district.
from the school district, yes.
But not including the stipend.
And not including the stipend from the school, from the town, I guess. And then I also checked to make sure that there was no timeline, that wasn't for 6 months after the expiration of a term. I wanted to make sure that was not in the RSA, so I reached out to legal, and we are good. We can take that out. So there's no timeline or time frame in the RSA. So those are the 2 changes that I put forth. And as we all know, we got some emails about this, and I guess we need to discuss. Anyone have any comments?
I have a specific one, and then I can share later a more general, but the 6 months, I know that last time, part of the concern was that the example that was used was perhaps a board member would be involved in voting for a budget or a salary for some big position, like an administrative role, knowing that they're going to resign and then jump right into that role. So I agree that a vast majority of things, I don't want to limit. I very much like taking out the 6 months for most everything, teaching positions, para positions, substitute teaching positions, all of those things, but is that a concern to the board for something bigger, like an administrative role that has a bigger impact or leadership? That's just my only question on that. I think overall, though, I'm glad that it's something that can be removed.
That's a good point.
Any other thoughts
On that topic?
on that topic?
I think that's a good point. I'm sort of less concerned about it, only because, in general, for those big positions, I think the compensation is commensurate with the position and the skill. And I think it's unlikely that a board member can slide into it without being qualified. So it's not a showstopper for me.
We would know.
Pardon me?
If they applied for it.
Right,
We don't have to approve it, though.
right.
But we would be aware of it.
Basically, there would have to be almost collusion
Right.
to abuse it, I think.
So, that is a good point, though, Beth.
Well, especially in this system, because your SAU employees are not this board. So it's-
Right, but an administrative job maybe.
Right, but that's what I mean, so you're looking at your principal or something like that, but from the other pieces, it would have to be the
So
other boards.
Liz is gonna vote for a huge increase for the principal and then quit her job and become principal. I'm being a little.
I mean, that's what policy's
scenario.
supposed to do. Policy's supposed to look at, like,
Ask the
not
question.
specifics to us. It's a good question. I mean, you could add language in.
The point is, there would be an awareness if that person applied for the job and
Right.
they're on the board.
Right.
So
So
what's
they
the
would-
harm here? Like, I mean, if if the person is the most qualified person for the job, what is the harm that they were on a board in the past?
With a one of seven board.
The question is,
They're only one person,
can they manipulate the system? And,
No,
I
but
think
it's,
as a one
there's,
of seven,
the
they
one of
can't
seven, they
necessarily.
can't.
No,
That's why
and
I'm
if
okay with
anything,
it,
I think
yeah.
that situation would most likely get more scrutiny than less.
Right.
Because obviously, there's gonna be a level of scrutiny from the public, like you only hired Liz because she was your friend and she'd been on the board. And then you have to say, no, but, and I can't even make up facts that would make me qualified for that position. So, I mean, but I think that's what you're talking about. So I don't think this is like, one, I don't see anyone on this board gunning for an administrator position in this district, or any district in the SAU.
I don't think
for that.
anyone wants an administrative position in
Certainly
any
not-
district right
certainly
now.
not
I'm
now.
shocked we have administrators at all some days.
Okay.
But the situation has potentially existed when, for instance, Rich Manley was on the Hollis board. Because he was a principal in another district. I mean, one could conceivably have seen him in that role advocating for a position knowing that
There's a lot of checks and balances on positions and.
Right, I'm not
Yeah.
saying it's a risk,
Yeah, I
I'm
don't-
just saying that it's not an absurd.
Well, and that person's not going to be able to vote to approve their own
I
position.
think maybe let's think about this a little bit differently, though. So the district's desperate for paras and substitutes and things like that, and someone, their term is up, and now they want to sub in the district. They have to wait 6 months before doing that. Do they have to wait 6 months before they can be a para in a district that, it's a small town and you can pop in?
So I resign today and I go take a position as para?
Yes. Yes.
Is that gonna cause you a problem? I'm not on the board any longer. You're no longer reporting to me, Andy.
I think she's going the other way, without taking that out.
Without
they
taking that
can't.
out, they can't for
She's
6
making the
months
case
and
for
That's
removing
why
it.
I brought it up.
Right. I think
because
it-
if there was something that I wanted to apply for as an administrative assistant or something, I don't think that you should be able to stop me from having a wage.
Right.
I mean, you could put active board member maybe, or something
Right.
like that, but if you're worried about somebody that's not elected another time, and
Right.
now you're saying that they couldn't, I mean, this does leave that kind of open.
Right,
If you
but
don't
what
get
if-
reelected in March, you can't take a job in April.
Right, and
Tina,
that's.
Did this come up for you?
I was on the co-op board, and I was hired by the SAU governing board.
Did anyone did anyone?
I asked the question when I was
Nobody
interviewing.
was bothered by it, right?
No.
But we didn't have this policy out tearing it apart either. Now we have it.
But she also wasn't hired by
Right.
district,
Right.
she was
She was-
hired by the SAU.
I'm just saying,
Right.
I
So
don't
that's-
think it was
right.
raised as a.
Right.
In fact, I brought it forward. I
Yeah.
questioned it.
So that's a good point, but I feel like taking the 6 months out protects us more from, gives us the opportunity to have board members who lose elections or choose not to
Continue to serve.
continue to serve, to be able to serve in another way, as a whatever. Okay, is there any other comments on this right now?
I just want to make general comment. I didn't say a whole lot at the last meeting because I was still kind of collecting thoughts, and I just wanted to share a couple of things that I have thought about since. I think that I really appreciate what Krista said last month about creating policy, not just for current, but for the future. And I agree with that wholeheartedly, and that's normally how I like to, look at policy as well. But on the same token of just even asking the 6-month question, I think one of the best things about this board is how thoughtful they are, but it also can be limiting too when we think so much, and we can even create situations that may never even happen. So I do worry about that sometimes, even with this limitation, that it can be, we're being proactive to make sure that there's not a conflict that could be a really big problem, but that might never happen. So I do appreciate that, and I think it's a really important question to ask. But I think one thing I've struggled with this is we live in a very small community, and because of that, board members are friends with student families, with teachers, with even our administrators, and you can't stop that. But that in itself is probably one of the biggest chances for a bias or a conflict of interest in that, and we can't stop that. but we have a need in a lot of areas for things like nursing or substitutes or pairs, those kind of things, and especially subs, but right now more than ever, it's not normally this, it's always an issue, right? Just like we always need bus drivers, but it's especially been a big issue last year and this year, and hopefully it's phasing out, but I just worry that there's more of a risk in something we can't control, and now we're gonna try to control something that is a little bit more manageable and could have safeties in place, when it's the less of the risky things for a bias. And I think too, it's come up too, just in conversation, we want to make sure we have an effective governance and a non-biased one. But the word bias is a little tricky too, because a bias is sometimes diversity too. And we have members of this board that have kids, and we have members of this board that don't have kids in the district, whether you have kids or not saying that, but whether they're in our cooperative district or not. But I think because we're each one part of something greater of 7, that's a strong suit for us. So I don't think, I don't know, I just think that there's a lot of risk involved in other things we can't control, and I really, really reject the idea that I have to, or anybody that serves in these roles has to choose between being a parent and being able to volunteer, or perhaps sub or help in a really needed role like nursing. Because I think our community is so small and we have such great needs. So I really worry about this, and I don't think I can support it as is because of that, because I see the great needs. And I think any time that we make this kind of hard, it's not a pleasant, sorry, I'm kind of thinking as I go, but it's not a pleasant job to do, especially now more than ever. I know, Liz, and several people have mentioned that the demands from the community are getting bigger and bigger, and so to limit even a parent's ability to volunteer in the school really worries me, because this is not a job where everybody's lining up to be on the school board. And the thought of limiting even volunteerism really scares me as a parent, because that's something I'm not okay with.
Did we change it?
No, we didn't change that, but it was brought up and suggested last time. But just in general, I think when we talked about it at policy, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but didn't really make any changes. But it was something the board talked about. But I just really wholeheartedly think you can't reasonably ask any board member to make that separation. But at the end of the day, I mean, why do we make policy? Why do we put procedures and policy in place? It's to help student achievement, help students move forward. And that's, I guess, the fundamental part of why I don't support this change. I think that we can find a common ground or a way to tweak policy or put a procedure in place that would protect our administrators, would protect the integrity of things, but still allow for help, especially in a pandemic situation or something like that. We talked about a couple different ideas of maybe like on a approved by the board or a year to year or maybe a quarterly basis or something, but that's why I can't support this, is I feel like we should be always making decisions that help move students forward, student achievement. And I think given the current desperate need for subs and supports in our school, I think this does the opposite. So that's why I don't support. But again, I'm one of 7, and I feel like this was pretty well agreed on by the board, so I support that. And I understand it, but that's why I feel like there's a delicate line, and I think it deserves more conversation and time before just saying we can't do this.
So frankly, I think we've misclassified this conversation entirely. This is not at all a board decision whether or not you can work in the school and be employed by the district and be on the school board. The statute, the state legislature has clearly told you you can't do both. And then, no, excuse me, let me finish. I gave you many minutes to talk. So, New Hampshire RSA 671-18 is eminently clear that no person employed on a salary basis by a school administrative unit or by any school district within a school administrative unit shall be a school board member in any district of the school administrative unit. Salaried positions include, but are not limited to, the following: teacher, custodian, administrator, secretary, school bus driver if paid by the district, school lunch worker, and teacher's aide, emphasis added. Look, if you don't like it, and if the school nurses who wrote letters in your in your support don't like the law, the place to go is to the legislature. I'm to the point, we could basically write this policy that says that we're going to follow the RSA, because that's all we're doing, is following the RSA. And I don't think the change in the one word, basically salaried or compensation, is really a change at all, and that's consistent with what our council has told us. And I think it's a bright line rule, and I think that unfortunately, your comments at this meeting and the communication that we received from school staff make it sound like this is something in our discretion, and I don't believe it is all in our discretion. If we want to follow the statute, which is what we promised to do when we raise our hand and sign that oath when we're first elected, is we're going to uphold the law of the state, then we can't change our policy to let you do something that's clearly prohibited by the statute. And there's nothing in the statute that says, if you have a pandemic, if it's hard, or if I really want to do it.
Okay, okay.
I really think, here's the thing. We have spent hours dealing with this situation. The administrator has spent hours dealing with this administration, this problem. This problem shouldn't exist. If she's going to uphold the oath that she gave when she was elected, it's an easy choice.
Holly, may I ask a
Sure,
question to you?
sure.
Are we talking about me and my individual subbing, or are we talking about policy? Because I'm speaking to a policy.
Right.
Well,
If this is-
unfortunately,
well,
none of the communication we received this
Okay,
week
okay,
was
let
to
her
a
finish,
policy.
let
It
her
was very
finish.
specific
Let
to
her
an
finish.
individual.
Well, but I think it's an important question to ask, because if we're speaking about policy, then that's what I've been addressing. But speaking about law, I want to make sure it's very clear to the board or to anybody that I am never going to be suggesting we don't do something that the law says we should be doing. That being said, I have been a member of this board for 2.5 years. I was, because this has been brought about to me, I would like to just have just a quick moment to say that on the 2.5 year, when I was elected 2.5 years ago, I had already been subbing in all 6 schools, and I think that was a pretty well-known thing, and I went straight to legal, straight to our superintendent. We discussed it, and what the way the law is being interpreted tonight by Liz is different than what our legal said, and I think that's the hardest part about this, is I think that every single one of us want to support the law, but the way it's interpreted and having different legal opinions makes it hard.
So we have had that issue, definitely.
Yep.
The thing that I want to clarify is what the RSA says. That's Liz's interpretation. We've heard a few things, but our policy has been clear. And we as a board weren't really following the policy. Our policy's clear. It says we're not supposed to be employed by the district. We're not supposed to accept a salary. We're changing the word to compensation just because the word salary has a little bit more flex, if you will, ambiguity. But the truth is that legal counsel has said a salary is any kind of payment. Wages, hourly wages, anything. That's a salary. So we're sticking with the policy and just clarifying it. But it was not about you, Beth. But the problem is that we did receive a significant amount of correspondence that was about you. And the thing is the problem with that interpretation and that correspondence is that the suggestion is we should just keep doing this and letting you do this because you're so great. And I think you probably are great. You're probably great at being a school nurse and great with the kids. But the issue is, what if you're not? What if you're not great? What if you're not good at what you do? What if all of us, because we interpret the policy that we can all just work, what if all 7 of us decide to start subbing in the districts and we're all there all the time? Our role here is to stay objective, to be neutral. We are the last point of any kind of conflict that comes through this district. If it's a major conflict, it's going to come to us. And we can't be in the trenches, if you will, all the time. And those communications prove how connected you are to that. And so it's not about you, it's about the policy. You're doing a good job in there, but we don't know we just have too many of us and we can't be doing it.
Well,
in
just
my
to
opinion,
clarify-
my
No, and just
opinion.
to clarify, there's just one quick thing you said about that the board has not been upholding it. And I just want to clarify, though, in the board's defense and in our administrative defense, this is not the first time this has come up. And 2.5 years ago, the definition of salary was exactly where the issue lied. And so I think, I understand the board's intention. And like I said, I am one of 7, and I completely support that. I think that there is a very big difference between how the compensation and salary were interpreted, and that is why we
I
had
think
different
that's why we're
legal
changing it.
advice. And so
Right.
I don't think that the board was not upholding it. I think
No,
that
we
that
had,
was.
it was murky. It was a murky interpretation of the law. There was different interpretations. It's not anyone's fault, if you will, except but that's where we are now. Go ahead, Tom. You were going to speak, I think.
If other people want to.
No, I just heard you go.
I'll go.
Okay, Cindy.
I'm not going to vote in support of this, and the same reason as what Beth just said. When I ran for the board, I was already subbing. It was known, and it was fine for a couple years, and then it became an issue for some of the board members. And the same exact thing happened. We went to legal. Legal looked at it. They said, as long as you're not a full-time employee, and I read the RSA at the time, I understand what Liz is saying, it specifies some things, it does not specify substituting. So for me, I'm not voting for the board policy because I personally don't believe that it follows RSA.
Would you want wording to change it to match RSA?
I think that substituting, I mean, you're saying compensation, where before they were saying salaried, which meant you were under contract or you had, it was a full-time
right.
position. Subbing is not, it's a pick and choose. I chose to do it because I liked being around the students. I chose to do it because I felt like the community needed it, and I still feel that way.
And just to clarify, this is specific to our board, so this is not a policy that you can't sub in Hollis or Brookline or in the SAU. It's specific to the co-op. So I want to make sure if anyone out there in the public is listening, so if.
Although.
And I do understand that, but I was already subbing at the high school before you guys changed the rules. So I mean, that's.
So the interpretation that I was told is that our policy, it's in keeping with the RSA, and it's clear that we are expecting that the board members will not be employed by their district as subs. Yeah.
Before I get into my comments, just the thing that Liz read, assuming she was reading the RSA, it says school administrative unit. So if the interpretation is that the wording there does in fact imply to positions such as substitutes and others.
Yeah, I don't think it does.
If it does, well, it's essentially the same wording that we have, then it's potential that it's not up to us to decide, but other districts may interpret that as them not being able to. But that's not for us to decide because it's not our district.
Right.
I support the change that's here to clarify my interpretation of salary, because I do think it was intended to cover all compensated positions, and I think that we have had evidence that the concerns are real and are appropriate, that it creates an environment where the separation of board and staff is damaged. So I support that, but I go further. I recommend a couple of other changes, and specifically the last sentence of number 3, where it says it is not the intent of this policy to prevent any board member from volunteering his or her services within the school community. I would like to see that removed, not because I think that's specifically it, but I would insert other language. My initial draft is, it is the intent of this policy to maintain board members' objectivity and impartiality. So rather than to say what it's not doing, to say what it is trying to do. And then with regard to volunteering, I am supportive of some limitations to volunteering. And the wording that I came up with was, a board member's volunteering within the district shall be limited to participation in their child's class or activities, and must be opportunities open to other parents or guardians, or by administrative requests for volunteers specifically to board members. So my point is that, and I'll pass
Can
this
you,
along.
can you give that to me or email
Yeah,
it to me? 'Cause
my
I'm-
point is
I
that,
can write that down.
and I've had several offline conversations with Beth and with a couple of others, and it's clear that as community members and board members, as community members and parents, we want to have the option of being involved in our students' involvement in the school. One of the reasons that people come around here is for that level of engagement. And I don't see the restricting of that. But what I'm trying to, what I don't want to encourage, and I would like to prohibit, is just the general activity of board members being in the schools. If they want to be in the schools as an active member of the school community, they shouldn't be board members. That's my contention. You've got to have that separation. Not saying don't be a parent, don't get involved with your kids' classes, but let's put bounds on that. At the same time, there are times when board members are asked to help. So for instance, in the pandemic, where there was a request made to board members to help fill the gaps so the schools could stay open, I want to leave it open for the administration to specifically go to board members and say, we have an exceptional situation, we need your help, whether it's an event that's celebratory or an emergency where personnel are needed. I want to leave a clause to allow that, but to make it the exception, not the default. So that's the intent of my wording, to make it,
So
no objections to being in your
Right.
kids' classes, but not just being there, so.
Is it, I'm just wondering, so are we drafting this so narrowly that, like, it would prohibit board members, please, Lord, not to be like team parents for, like, teams?
No, because that is a child's class or activities.
Okay, child's class or well, okay, so then if it was a.
But if your kids aren't on the team, I don't think you should do
Okay,
anything.
so, and I think we just have to play with that language, because I think we would want, it's like, here's the example, the middle school dance. They're desperate for volunteers, so I'm trying to finish my suicide prevention training, so I can do that. That's not my child's class, in a sense, it's not a classroom, but.
I think he's got
That would be an
administrative.
administrative request to a board member, to board members.
But they didn't ask her.
No,
directly,
nobody asked
so-
me to do it. I just, so,
Well, I
so
think you
that,
should ask
that
me.
is some, okay. So I just want to make sure I understand the spirit of it, because I think I could live with it. I
Child's
mean,
class or activities. So if your child's attending the middle school dance, it's his activity. So
okay, I just kind of want to understand, like, what things, what do people think that they should be able to do versus what they
and
shouldn't
it's
be able to
open
do?
to it's an opportunity open to other parents and guardians also. So it's a broad brush. So the language is broad. I think we can take it back to policy because we this is first
I
reading.
realize that's why I'm trying to get some
Right, get
clarification.
some clarity. Yep, got
I
it.
just want to make sure I understand Tom.
That's impossible.
I realize that. That's why
second that.
we've been together long enough. I just know I need some points of clarification. I just want to
think
make
it's-
sure that I
it's like solicited volunteerism is like when it's requested, when it's related to your own personal situation. It seems like this is good language. I'm not saying whether or not I like the language or support the language. I'm just saying that the language to me is clear.
I just have another comment, and again, a little bit different than that, and it's just in relation to this.
Yeah, or just email it to me.
Again, we all know each other, and for the most part, like each other, respect each other, I think, and that's why it's so hard when we're making this about specific people, because that's where we have to make it more general, and we have to look at it 10 years from now when none of us are on the board to talk about people who should be on the board. And the thing is,
Tom will still be here in 10 years.
Tom will be there in 10 years. So when 6 of us aren't here, but Tom will be here.
I love not being here. 7 of us. Unless Krista's here with a candy ball.
But we are elected by the taxpayers, and we have a duty to represent the community for our education. And I think if it's easy, we certainly, as Beth said, when you have kids, we know families, we know teachers, we know staff, we know coaches, and we have a lot of warmth and good feelings towards them, and certainly want to do great things for them and have great things happen. I will say, of the 7 of us, we all support our administrators and staff significantly. I can't say that's always true for every board, but this board in particular, very much supportive. But we do have to keep that separation because the staff is represented by unions. They do have representation. We have to be able to keep ourselves a little bit separate from that and be able to look at things objectively, as Holly was saying. And so that's how I look at it a little bit differently, is that we were elected by the taxpayers not to work in the schools and not to get ourselves too entrenched in with the staff that it's difficult for us to separate sometimes when we have to, in terms of contract negotiations, in terms of
There's a lot of things.
mediation. So that's how I see it. It's not about specific people. And the problem is, I think we've been allowing it because of specific people, and I think we kind of have to pull ourselves back and look at it in a different way. Do we need to make exceptions for years like we've had? I don't know. I mean, if we want to add those in there and say, with exceptions,
So
we
would
need them?
you want to see a statement, both of you have indicated this, like an exception can be made with board approval, or, I mean, that puts the board in a really tricky spot.
I know,
Because then
that's
you'd
the
have to
tricky-
be
I know, but then we're
voting
doing
on who
exactly-
can do it and who can't do it. So that's
Right,
why I didn't
right,
suggest
right.
that language.
Right.
And I do want to touch a little bit on the fact that we do all have children or have community members that are teachers, that are friends of ours or neighbors. We walk into this job as elected officials within the town that we live in. And we do live and breathe with people, and we constantly have to work at putting that aside, if it's impacting your kid or if it's impacting your friend's kid. And so there's already so many levels and moments when we have to do that. To add another level where we're in the building a lot and learning more, that's just another level, and it just creates more and more potential conflicts of interest. And so I do support this change, not Tom's change. I don't know about Tom's change. I have to think about Tom's change. So are we ready at least to take a vote on first read, bring it back next month with these changes, potentially go back to policy? Yes?
I just want to make it clear that approving first read does nothing, says nothing about whether you'll approve the meeting. It's
third
mainly
read.
just acknowledging that you received and understand and participated.
Yep. Are we set for that? Can I call the vote? All those in favor of first read? 4. Opposed? 2. Okay, so we have one more. 4-2.
IKFA, it's early graduation. This is something that Mr. Grisone brought up, and to make a very long story short, just for the board to keep caught up on policy.
Do you want a motion first?
Oh, yes, I guess we
Sorry.
could do that, because we have others, yeah, we can just do a motion.
Yeah, I need a motion to accept policy except for first read, IKFA, early graduation.
Is there any
as
desire
presented.
to have it as an adoption at this point?
Yes.
Was that your goal?
Yes, I think
Yes.
adopt, was it to be amended and adopted?
Yes, because I
Okay.
can't imagine,
Yes,
you know.
yes, so I need a motion to accept as first read and adoption, policy IKFA, as
So moved.
proposed,
Second.
as presented, I
Okay,
mean.
so just-
So moved by
yeah.
Tom, seconded by Beth.
Yeah, just to explain, this came up in policy just because we were already starting to kind of look at a couple of other policies. I called it a cluster and then got mad, got yelled at for calling it a cluster, but it is more than 3, so just to keep the board informed. You know, Mr. Grisone was kind of looking at policy, saw some discrepancies with language in there, but what happened is it looks like a very big onion to unpeel. So that's why we are only going to focus tonight on IKFA. It's a very simple change. All of the other policies that are kind of embedded or referenced or anything, and even
Gina has
more
a
so that
packet.
Gina has found too, are going to be kind of looked at on a longer term basis that, you know, Gina's going to bring to policy and Mr. Grisone will work on, but this is like not something you'll see in the next month or two. This is like the course of the school year because it's very significant, involving like total rewrites, legal changes, and even just changes desired within our school district to make it
So this
current.
was an easy one to do.
This is the easy one. So we brought one. So this one, if you just look at the very last sentence, we reference valedictorian and salutatorian. We no longer have those. And so I think the general gist or the meaning behind this was to say if a student was eligible for early graduation, it did not stop them from having special recognition for their academic achievements. So that is the change, and that is only a change. So I think that's why it should potentially be an easy adopt. We now have the Latin honor system. So they would basically be eligible for that and any other recognitions.
Is this a required policy?
I don't know.
I can look. If
I
have, like,
should I know that
5%.
off the top of my head?
I don't know, I'm just like wondering why we need this policy at all.
My guess is that early graduation is a required policy because it crops up and it becomes a very contentious one if you don't.
There's also the age of attendance, right?
So are we ready to vote?
Required by law, yes.
It's required. That answers your question, Liz. Are we set to vote? Are we set?
I don't know.
Liz, are we set to vote?
Is this the model policy?
This is the policy we had in place for a very,
Yeah, it's our policy.
No. How does this compare
Okay,
to
just
the
a sec.
School Board Association model recommended policy?
It really the recommended policy just identifies the fact that you must be in school until you're 18. So it focuses more on that. Whereas our focus is more on completing requirements.
Well, then do we have a policy that tells our kids?
You have to be in school.
Do you have to be 18, did you say?
Well, you have to be in school until you're 18 or you graduate. So if you graduate at 16,
That's why you have to have parental permission.
Oh, I thought you were saying you had to be 18 to early
no.
graduate.
You have to be in school until you're 18.
Right.
So what are we doing? Can we decide, we've got this as first read and adopt. Are we ready to do that? Or do we need to change it to first read because you want to look at it further? I don't want to sit here and compare it tonight. Like,
I
we're
would say
either
this is-
first read and we're moving on tonight, or we're first read and adopt. What am I doing?
To me, this is a housekeeping.
It's
We've
a
changed the
housekeeping item.
terminology of the recognition that we offer.
Right.
And this is
it's-
adopting that. It's not passing judgment on the policy itself.
Right.
It's correcting a terminology
Right.
discrepancy we have.
Right. So can we take a vote on this then?
Is it first read and adopt?
First read and adopt.
If somebody objects to the policy,
Like,
we should bring it up under a totally separate movement to relook at
Right, so
the
first
policy.
reading,
But
okay,
then
all,
when else are we going to have time to do that?
So it's actually in my collection of policies that have to do with credits, full-time status, et cetera. So it is part of the bigger picture that I'm reviewing with Tim.
It may come back, it may circle around again,
Just to
but at least
housekeep,
if
Hannah.
it doesn't, we've got the language right.
all those in favor? 6-0. Okay, motion carries.
2008.
Like about 1,000 policies.
Okay, so we don't. That's what happened. Okay,
That
so I
was-
need a report
Tom
out.
was the only one at that meeting.
Steve came to the thing
Okay.
with 30 policies to approve that night.
Okay, so we have a
Had to be
report
more
out
than that.
from the process observer.
So everything moved along very smoothly. We did need more time on the suicide prevention presentation and class size numbers, but I guess the class size numbers, that should be we know that probably needs a little more time in the future. And then a little bit extra time in deliberations, but for the most part, stuck pretty on
Great.
schedule with everything else allotted.
Thank you very much, and just for your information, we'll put HP highlights in again. I knew we had a lot to do tonight, so, I need a motion to adjourn?
There's no non-public?
No, there's no non-public, sorry.
So moved.
Moved by Beth, seconded by Tom. All those in favor? 6-0, 9:29. Thank you. Good night, everyone.